Excellent, thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the land we are all on as we meet this afternoon, and the knowledge and wisdom of those that walked before us on these lands. We are meeting on the land of the Indigenous people of our province, including the Métis people. These people came before us and brought great wisdom of working together for a greater good. I wish to bring forward their blessings for progress in education, for us to learn more and do better as we walk together this afternoon to come to common ground for the betterment of all people. Hi, hi. So welcome. I'd like to begin the meeting with approval of the agenda. And Craig?
I'd like to add one item to action items.
Okay.
6.7, meeting times. Board meeting times,
Board
specifically.
meeting times.
Yep.
Okay. Is there anything else? Jenny?
Can I add an action item as well to discuss the provincial REP during action items as well?
Okay, so 6.8 REP. Okay, the agenda is there. Can I have approval as amended? Christina? And all in favor? Thank you. And just for the public to know, Christine Light is joining us from her home, so I'll be looking up to the camera for her as well during the meeting. So thank you for that. So I need now an approval of the minutes from our last regular meeting of November 23rd. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, could I have somebody approve those minutes? And Andrea, and all in favor? And that's carried. There's no business arising from the minutes, so I'd like to move on to our numeracy resource presentation. And will that be you, Karen, leading it, or you will turn it over to your team? Okay, so I'll go over to Karen.
Thank you, Alice. Good afternoon, everyone. So we have two lead teachers in our school division. One is a literacy lead teacher in the form of Bev Smith, and we have a numeracy lead teacher in the form of Michaela Demers. Michaela, if you want to give a little wave, there we go. And I just want to explain a little bit about what the lead teacher role is. So the lead teachers are to immerse themselves in research and resources and best practices in their specific content area. And then they work very closely with teachers, usually elbow to elbow with them in the classrooms, to model the use of the resources and the best practices. And then they coach and support teachers as teachers actually change practice. This is the 6th year in our division that we've had a literacy lead teacher, and it's the 4th year that we've had a numeracy lead teacher. Jen Giles is here. Jen, if you could just give a wave too, please. Jen is currently the vice principal of Senator Joyce Fairburn, but she was our first numeracy lead teacher, so she was in the role for 3 years, and Michaela, this is her very first year in the role. So when we first hired Jen, we had 2 areas of focus. We wanted to build consistency and accuracy with regards to math vocabulary across the division with our teachers. And we also wanted to support teachers in supporting students in math fact acquisition, not just for recall, but for understanding why, for example, 4 + 5 = 9, and the different ways that we can represent that so that students walk away with a deeper understanding of that mathematical concept. We have in both the literacy and the numeracy areas, literacy and numeracy committees at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And those committees are comprised of teachers and administrators from every school. And so that committee really serves as a conduit of information between the committee and the schools. So they bring information to the committee from the schools with regards to celebrations, questions, concerns, ideas, professional learning topics. And they go back and share information from the committee with regards to the professional learning and ideas that we have around supporting teachers and what they're needing in their schools. So it's these committee members that we turn to when we are looking at piloting resources. They're the first people that we speak with, particularly on the numeracy end of things. And so in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and she's going to talk a little bit about some background information on a resource. That was one of the big things we needed, was a comprehensive, easily used, effective resource for math fact acquisition. She's going to talk about the relationship that she built with the creator of the resource that we purchased, the process that we followed, and then she's also going to introduce a brief video as well. So Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. So to start off, I was given those two mandates of vocabulary and math facts. And in my research collaboration, was able to uncover a new resource that was going to be published at the beginning of not this school year, but last school year. And I had a teacher at Dr. Proby reach out to me and ask, she was going to purchase it for her classroom because she was really interested in it. So I told her just to hold off, that I was hoping to purchase that resource and do a pilot. And with that, and with collaboration with Karen, we were able to purchase 3 toolkits that we were able to get out into schools and pilot. And I was able to work with Bobby McKinnon at Dr. Proby, and she was able to host our first pilot. She also came to our numeracy committee and presented to the committee on the value of the resource, the value in her classroom from an instruction perspective and also from a learning perspective, so from the students as well. And we were able to gain some momentum. More schools came on board. They were interested in piloting this resource. As more pilots occurred throughout the year, those teachers came to the numeracy committee, shared their experiences, and with that, we were able to make a recommendation as a numeracy committee to the board that we could make a division-wide purchase. We were successful in that, and we were so grateful for that opportunity. And we were able to purchase enough of those resources to get them into our classrooms. And so it's a building fact fluency for addition and subtraction. And as it targets mostly K to 3 curricular outcomes. And so we were able to get to that resource into our K to 3 classrooms with a few extra in our 4 to 6 classrooms. We were also able to purchase 2 for our middle schools and then 1 for our high school, because we do know that we are in need of that intervention at those levels. And so we were really excited to get those resources into the hands of teachers. Through the work of the pilot, I was reached out to Graham Fletcher. Graham Fletcher is a math consultant, former Canadian, or he is always a Canadian, but living in the United States and working there. Built a relationship with him, and I was able to work on his piloting of the multiplication and division toolkit, and have a few teachers in the division give feedback on the multiplication and division games that he had created. This fall, he he published the multiplication and division toolkit, and through the relationship that I built with him, he offered to provide a free 1-hour professional development session for all of our teachers across the division in October. And we were so grateful for that opportunity and to hear it firsthand from someone that provides that professional learning in such an engaging way. And that's just a little bit on the toolkit. Now we're going to watch a video that we created at the end of last year with a few of the teachers that had really taken off with the resource in their classroom. So Leanne, if you could share that video, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Can you guys hear Leanne? Okay, so she's asking Jen, can you tell us where the video is is it in your package, and where can she find the video?
I think Karen might be able to answer that question.
Garrett had it, and he was going to share it with Leanne, I think. So maybe while we sort that out, we will just keep going on our presentation, and we can maybe track that down for you. So basically in the video, you're going to hear teachers' testimonials about the difference that this kit has made in their teaching practice and in their students' learning, which is very exciting, of course. We were able to purchase those kits because of the board's financial support to the tune of about $100,000. And so one of the reasons that we're here today is to say thank you to the board for their support in the past, their current support, and we're hoping to say thank you potentially for some future support too, because if things go the way we think they're going with regards to the multiplication and division piloting in our schools that Michaela's going to talk about in a minute, we're pretty confident we might be coming back to the board and asking for some additional funds, excuse me, to purchase these kits at elementary, middle, and high school. I'm going to turn it over to Michaela to just talk a little bit about that multiplication and division kit.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. So this multiplication and division kit that has been recently published, it is currently in 4 of our schools, and it's actually been accessed by 5 schools so far. So it's been transferred from one school to another already in the piloting process, similar to what Jen had done with the addition and subtraction kit. We are having the kit be piloted by both elementary and middle school teachers because it is targeted to like that 3, 4 to 6 range for grades. And so far, we've had a lot of success. Teachers are very excited about it, and there are quite a few schools who have reached out to me directly, and I'm sure to Jen when they had heard of the kit being published that they would like to access it. So there's already a lot of buzz out in our schools around this particular kit. I can place really quickly an image in the chat box here that just kind of highlights all of the elements that are in the kit in case you are curious to what is contained. It's very similar to the addition and subtraction kit, but there are some additional activities and games that go along with it to really strengthen that foundational number sense and multiplicative reasoning. So I'll toss that in there for you to potentially view if you would like to. And this piloting process is again going to be very similar to the previous year. We'll have the teachers who are piloting this kit come to our numeracy committee meetings and share their successes with that kit and what it looked like in their classrooms. So that's a little bit of information for you there, and that's kind of a big a piece of my role currently as I've stepped into this position.
Thank you, Michaela. Now, it's my understanding that there was going to be a kit in the boardroom for the board to look at. Is it there? I see Christine, I think, getting up.
I know today has been kind of a crazy day around the board office. So certainly, I know that Garrett has been busy. So if those items aren't in here, we can certainly work to find those, but just might not be at this time.
That's totally fine, Allison, and certainly the board is free to watch that video at another time as well. That's the information that we wanted to share with you and our gratitude, as well as just a heads up that we might be coming and asking. It'll probably be more than $100,000 because this next multiplication and division kit will be much more applicable at elementary, middle, and high school. So the numbers of kits that we would be ordering potentially would be greater than what we ordered for the addition and subtraction. And of course, as we know, costs are going up across the board in everything. So just a heads up, and thank you so much for your time.
Sounds good. In terms of you guys coming back to us, is that before this budget year cycle, or are you thinking in the future year?
It's a great question, Allison. We're in that process now of piloting, and I'm thinking it'll be sometime in the next coming months for sure.
Okay, thank you. I know Craig has a question. Go ahead, Craig.
Hi. One of my questions is, how does this fit in with the government announcement that they're going ahead with the math curriculum for K to 4? Does it support the new math program from the government?
Thank you, Craig, for asking that question. The BFFs, as we tenderly call them, the Building Fact Fluency Kits, are a match to the current curriculum because of the emphasis on fact, recall, and acquisition. And it's also, the fact piece is also part of the draft curriculum that was re-released again yesterday. Oh, and I've also included for your interest the Numeracy work plan from the division perspective so that you can see how this kit also ties into a variety of strategies that we're using to build math capacity in our students.
So just to follow up on that, that would mean that, especially for the teachers that have to deal with the new curriculum, this is actually supporting that new curriculum to the point where they don't have to really delve into depth into that part. They've already got that knowledge. Is that correct?
In terms of the building fact fluency piece, yes, teachers would have access to this resource and would be using it in classrooms, and that would certainly be a support to them and their students moving forward.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, I was part of the curriculum working group last October. I had signed the non-disclosure, but I had access to see what that curriculum looked like. So I was able to help provide an informed decision in moving forward and making that recommendation for the resource without really being able to say it because I had been part of that process. So I just wanted to share that piece.
Thank you, Jen. We actually have the video ready if you guys are good for us to go ahead and watch that at this time. As long as it all works. Okay, we are going to be watching this at a future time. And I know as board members, we definitely look forward to watching this and seeing the teachers' responses and to see it in action. So we appreciate that. Seeing no other questions, or Andrea, you might be. Andrea's got a question.
I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation. And it's funny because I had a teacher ask if we would be buying the multiplication and division. So they must really like the kits. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
And I think it'll be great when we get to actually touch the kit that you guys sent for us to check out. So we'll take a look at that as well. Thank you guys for all the work that you've done. I know, Jen, you've put a lot into this over the last few years, and we appreciate all that. And Michaela, your work going forward, and Karen in the work you do. So thank you all, and thank you for your presentation today. And we look forward to when you come back and ask for some moolah and to hear more information about how the pilot went. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on, we have authorization of locally developed courses. This was a MORAG thing, so I'm going to turn it over to Cheryl to provide us with the information we need.
Okay, this isn't a typical time of year that locally developed courses are brought forward to the board, but these are unique because they are courses that are specific to the IB program that's offered at Winston Churchill. And so because they had been recently revised, I know that Churchill came forward and said we are hoping that we can bring forward these for authorization by the board in December. And so we've got 3 courses. They would all require a separate motion. We have the biology LDC 3232 biology 35-3, and that's a 3-credit course that we Edmonton School Division gives us permission to use. The second is LDC 2241 chemistry, another IB course 25-3, again for 3 credits. And the 4th course is another chemistry. The 3rd is chemistry 25-5 for 5 credits, and LDC 2241. And so again, those courses are specific to the IB program at Winston Churchill.
Excellent. So at this point, I'd be looking for a motion on the first recommendation there. So if somebody would like to make that motion and read it. Tyler, you want to go ahead with the first one?
Quick question first, then I can do that.
Yeah.
So they have the same course number with 25.5 and 25.3. Obviously, that has to do with the credits. Is that just the amount of time spent in the course, or why is the same course a 3-credit course and a 5-credit course?
Every credit is about 25 hours.
Okay, so it's just a matter of
It's the number of
much time
hours,
they're
right? And
putting
so a
into-
3-credit course is about 75 hours. A 5-credit course is about 125 hours.
okay. No, thank you. Okay. I move that the board approve the continued use of LDC 3232 Biology IB 35.3 for 3 credits from the Edmonton School Division from August 31st, 2022 to August 31st, 2024 to provide continuance of program offerings to students.
Thank you, Tyler. Is there any questions? Go ahead, Craig.
Just a, a quick one on these IB programs. Does that do they actually get credit to the towards university, or is it just a more in-depth course than what they would get from Alberta Ed?
They get high school credit because they are recognized by Alberta Education's locally developed courses, and they contribute to their IB baccalaureate recognition that some universities recognize, some don't recognize, but it does contribute to their baccalaureate program.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions on the motion? All in favor? And that's carried. Looking for somebody to make the second motion. Andrea, go ahead.
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the continued use of LDC 2441 Chemistry IB 25-3 for 3 credits from August 31st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023 to provide continuance of program offerings to students.
Thank you, Andrea. Are there any questions? Seeing none, those in favor? And that's carried. And then I'm looking for a motion for the third one. Craig?
I move that the Board of Trustees approve the continued use of LDC 2241 Chemistry IB 25-5 for 5 credits from August 31st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023 to provide continuance of program offerings to students.
Thank you. And are there any questions? And those in favor? Jenny? Thank you. And that's carried. Perfect. Thank you for that. Moving on to policy review. I know that Craig, you're the chair of that committee. Did you want to go ahead with this piece? Okay.
Yep. We had a board meeting. We had a policy meeting December 8th. And the following came back, that's in your agenda, and I hope you've read them, as amended with input from the various stakeholders in our division. So I will just move on that I will move that we adopt the policy 204.12 board meeting minutes as amended.
Are there any questions or comments on that one? And those in favor? And that's carried.
The next one was the employee absent requiring substitution, policy 401.4. And I move that we accept the policy 401.4 employee absences requiring substitutes as amended.
Any comments or questions? Those in favor? And that's carried.
The next one is policy 405.5 practicum student. I move that we adopt 405.5 practicum student as amended.
Any questions? Those in favor? Jenny? And that's carried.
The next one is policy 405.6. I move that policy 405.6 employee recognition and appreciation as amended. I move that we accept that.
Any questions? Those in favor? And that's carried.
And finally, and this is a new one, policy 406.1. I move that we accept the enterprise risk management as presented. For what? First reading.
First reading.
Okay.
And any questions?
Are there any questions on it being first reading? We do have to go to second and third reading. Yeah, at the next meeting, we would go to second and third reading, but that's how process goes for when a brand new policy comes forward. So it goes to first reading, and then at your second meeting, you can do, at the next meeting, you can do second and third, as long as there's unanimous approval on that second reading. Go ahead, Christina.
Was this policy created because of insurance request, or was it just?
Christina or Christine?
It wasn't an insurance request, but it is come from some work I've been doing with my insurance risk management claims committee through USIC. And it's good practice. And so a number of boards have started looking at an enterprise risk management policy and practice and procedure. It's when we do, and you'll see it goes to the audit committee for that's kind of the accountability piece. When you do audits, you're always assessing risk, financial risk and whatnot. And so it's sort of a natural there. But this goes beyond that. This is risk to the enterprise of achieving its objectives. So it could be related to curricular outcomes. It could be related to insurance risk, those type of risk management issues. Could be reputational risk and all those sort of human resource risk. And so there's a number of layers. And so that's why we brought that to cover our bases as an organization to make sure that we're achieving our goals and outcomes that have been set.
Craig?
And it also, then it becomes a component of the board's assurance model.
Okay. Tyler?
The last sentence up there just before references, when the board delegates the superintendent the authority, should that be where designate? Because I can't believe the superintendent would really write the procedures. I would guess that it would be an associate superintendent that does it. Is that, or is there some rule that says superintendent needs to be the one to develop the procedures?
No, probably our designate would be appropriate.
Okay.
That is a friendly amendment.
I would throw a friendly amendment to put that in there then, because I don't, like I said, I don't think the superintendent would actually in practice be drafting those procedures.
Cheryl?
I can't remember what the end of all of our policies say, whether they say superintendent or whether they say superintendent or designate, because I guess it's assumed that the superintendent would designate to whomever is the most qualified to draft it, right? So I'm not, do the rest of the policy say superintendent or superintendent designate? I can't remember.
In that statement at the bottom of
Or designate? Perfect. So it should say that.
on the previous ones that we just did today, on that bottom line, it says the board delegates to the superintendent on like the practicum student one, on the employee absent one, and it's on the top portion, like the employee absent one on the very top part of the policy, it says the superintendent or designate is on, but that's actually to do the actual policy, sorry. But yeah, on the bottom of all of these, it actually doesn't say or designate.
Can I think I understand why it would just say superintendent, because the superintendent is the only employee of the board. And so you're delegating your employee to carry out these procedures under the policies. And then of course the superintendent would then, designate it to her staff. Yeah.
So there will be no friendly amendment. Perfect. Nothing friendly. Excellent. Okay, are there further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried for our first reading. Excellent. Is that it for you, Craig? Okay, but for policy, that's it for you right now? Okay, thank you. So carrying on, next is our 2022-2023 school year calendar, and I will turn that over for Cheryl.
Right, and so, one of the tasks that needs to be done annually, of course, is drafting and then getting approval for a school year calendar. And so certainly, as we look at a school year calendar, it sometimes appears that we've got more flexibility within those 10 months than in actuality we do. So when you take a look at the beginning of the school year in September, if we could make that a little bit bigger, Leanne, up on the screen. And so in September, of course, that's really determines from the beginning of the year to the end of the year is how many days you have in between. And so we really try to be as consistent as possible for the number of days that staff are in schools and the number of days that students are in school. So when the long weekend, when Labor Day falls on the 5th, it makes it very difficult. It's one of the years where we have the smallest or the less amount of days for students and staff, because when it falls on the 6th or 7th, we have students start before the long weekend. And of course, not when it's on the 5th, every year now after this, we'll end up adding a day to that instructional time. So just want to make, sort of bring that to people's attention. So on this calendar, the staff, proposed calendar, the staff start on August 29th. And in accordance with policy, sort of the 5 days before the beginning of the school year for students. We have recognized September 30th, Truth and Reconciliation, as a non-operational day. Of course, October 10th as is Thanksgiving. We've got the 11th as the assessment day for middle school, elementary school, and that was a day that the board discussed and supported a number of years ago with the Working Conditions Committee when a number of assessments came into practice at the elementary level and middle school level for literacy and numeracy. And that was sort of it's not in the collective agreement, but a commitment that when possible, not always, when possible, that would be put into the calendar. The 21st and 22nd of October are parent-teacher interview days for elementary, middle school, and high school. And of course, the combination of what those days look like, as well as professional learning, depends upon the level and when those are scheduled. We've got November 11th, Remembrance Day, the 14th of November as a division-wide professional learning day. It's traditional to have two professional division-wide professional learning days in one in the fall, one in the spring. So we've got November 14th, and we have April 17th. And December, this, calendars move along. This year, current school year, we're out quite early for Christmas. Next year, and of course, people like one or the other. Next year, we start quite close to Christmas, the Christmas holidays, which I think some people really appreciate. And so school will end on the 23rd and then be back in on January 9th, leaving quite a bit of time after the Christmas holiday for non-operational days. January 27th is middle school parent-teacher interview days, elementary school and high school professional learning. February is that traditional break. The teachers' convention is the Thursday, Friday, the 23rd, 24th. Family Day is the 20th. And then we have our March, again, parent-teacher interviews for elementary school, our April Easter break, our May long weekend day and Victoria Day, and then the school professional learning day on the 23rd, with school finishing for students on June 28th and for staff on the 29th. So altogether, there's 195 teacher days, 180 student days at the high school level, and 179 at the elementary and middle school level. Any questions?
Jenny.
The September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I remember reading some news articles about that for this year and some of the controversy with some provinces that chose to acknowledge this day and some that did not. And my understanding was that Alberta was not very compliant on that. And so my question is whether that has changed or not. And if Alberta isn't recognizing this day as a province, does that pose a childcare problem for working parents if they are working that day and children are off?
I can't say for certain, Jenny, and you may have heard more than me. I'm not 100% sure. I didn't have that sort of conveyed my way. You may have heard things as members of the community, trustees or parents. So certainly, I mean, whether or not the province recognizes it next year, I'm not sure. I know that when we worked on calendars, we share across the South and across the province, and all of the school divisions that I know about have September 30th as Truth and Reconciliation Day.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I think with more notice this year that people will be able to adjust their schedules to it. So
Thank you. I have Craig and then Tyler.
Yeah, I'm just just wondering. I know that all schools have different amounts of hours of instruction, but based on these days, if everyone, let's just use a generic thing, if everybody had the same hours of instruction, how many hours of instruction are for elementary and middle school under this calendar, and how many for high school?
So in accordance with the Education Act, there's a minimum of 950 hours for elementary, for grades 1 through 9,
Yeah.
and a total of 1,000 hours for grades 10, 11, 12, and kindergarten is 450 hours of minimum instructional hours. And so certainly all of our schools with this calendar and any calendar that's made and fit those requirements in their calendars. And most of our schools put a buffer of hours. In other words, our schools, I would say, there's some that are close to the number, 950 and 1,000, but most of our schools build in extra time, right? So just in case there's days that end up non-operational. So most of our schools will add in anywhere from 6 to 12, 15 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. And then Andrea.
I was trying to look for it, but I'm pretty sure the Alberta government for upcoming in 2022 adopted September 30th as a provincial holiday, whereas they did not subscribe to it provincially in 2021. I believe they did in 2022. I can't seem to find it, but I'm pretty sure I heard that.
Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you, Tyler. And Andrea.
With the interview day in March on the 16th with the slash through it, is that a half day for elementary for parent-teacher interviews?
Yes, that's a half day.
And do they find that's enough time to see that many
I
parents?
haven't heard otherwise, Andrew,
Okay.
so I'm not sure. Yeah. I think they do afternoon, evening, and then the next morning. Yeah.
My question is around now that we have some shared busing with Holy Spirit, is there some consideration together with Holy Spirit to try to have calendars look similar? And I know that Holy Spirit has some other challenges that they have to face, but I think if we can certainly look forward to minimizing the double runs when we don't have school and they're running, or they don't have school and we're running.
It's certainly not perfect. We do our best. I know that Holy Spirit has 4 other school divisions that they have to work with to try to, as best as possible, link their calendars. They have some different days that are specific to religious celebration that would look different than us. I can say that the big ones are the same, not necessarily all of the PL days, right? So in other words, our Christmas, Easter, and so forth are common, but they do have some different celebration days.
Thank you. There are other questions, comments? Seeing none, we do need approval from the board for this. So is there somebody that would like to make that motion? Christina?
I move that we approve the 2022-2023 school year calendar as presented.
Thank you. Any further questions? Those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now I'd like to move on to multi-faith calendar, and that's Christina Larkin.
Thank you. So I've provided a fairly detailed presentation in the board package, so I won't reiterate it here in the interest of time. That being said, now that we have adopted our calendar for next year, and as we know that this is an annual event, I would like us to consider that there are many students who find that their family celebrations that are critical to their spiritual and family well-being are not represented or acknowledged by our school division, often to the detriment of their personal identity and healthy development. This is certainly not unique to Lethbridge School Division by any means, and certainly all the school staff make great effort to include families' cultures in our schools. I would like to offer, though, that we have an opportunity to embody our priority of inclusion by adopting a supplemental calendar, the multi-faith calendar. I have attached a draft in this report that was developed by the Edmonton Public School Boards. And my recommendation would be that we would consider adopting this multi-faith calendar not adopting it, that we would consider exploring using the multi-faith calendar from the Edmonton Public School Board to create a locally contextual version that would be able to inform educators, schools, and staff to the presence of these important days in the lives of our students, and encourage schools to be conscientious when scheduling things like parent-teacher interviews or exams that might interfere with school attendance for children who do not celebrate holidays that are recognized in our calendar. So I'll open it to questions if there's any questions on the report that I provided.
Craig.
So what you're asking is that schools are they'll still be school, there'll be no general holiday, but that students will be excused for these religious reasons. And you listed all the different groups, and that all we would have to do is make a recommendation to our admin team that they would inform the teachers that to try and avoid having certain things going on those days. Is that the gist of it?
Sorry. So actually, in the Education Act, school children are already allowed to be excused for days of religious significance to no detriment to their absence record. So my recommendation is simply that we create a calendar that works for our context, that helps teachers recognize the days that are coming up for children and families, and for staff. Obviously, we have staff of a variety of faiths as well, and that those days be shared so that schools can plan accordingly, in acknowledgement that often children are forced to choose between either being absent from school for an important day or being absent from their family for an important day. And both are obviously very important to the development.
And I think that it's what you're saying is that when teachers are booking exams or different important educational things, that they're not on these, that we're recognizing these dates that are provided in the calendar, that we're avoiding those dates as much as possible so that students don't have to choose between coming and writing an exam or celebrating with their family for an important religious event for them. Is that kind of what it?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I see Christine and then Tyler.
Well, Christina, I think this is a really inclusive addition, I think, to our calendar and to our school culture, and definitely acknowledging every student creates a culture of inclusivity and welcoming. Change can also be daunting, right? And so I read through the list, and I looked through the links that you provided. Is there have you heard a lot of feedback from staff utilizing this calendar, and how readily and easily they've been able to adapt it to their scheduling?
Go ahead, Christine.
So this calendar was actually just passed this was the draft. The one that I attached was the draft that was actually just approved at Edmonton Public's most recent board meeting. And so this was about a year in development with their administration from the proposal last December.
Thank you.
I then have Tyler and then
Okay,
Jenny.
I just had questions. I don't know if we have to go back or not, but so our calendar that we have now that we just approved, what do we call that? Is that the Lethbridge School Division calendar, or does it have a specific name?
It's submitted to the province as the school year calendar.
School year calendar, okay. So my question is, are you wanting to have a multi-faith calendar that is separate, that shows all these dates, or are you wanting these dates to be incorporated and listed within our school year or official school year calendar?
Excellent question. I would defer that to the administration. That's an operational question in my opinion. My goal would be that school staff have access to an official record of upcoming holidays for the school year in a fashion that the administration deems workable.
Jenny?
I just wanted to say thank you for bringing this forward. My question is just more specifically the implementation of it. And so is this something that is more informational for teachers, or things that we would be recognizing in school as well? Are we proposing trying to work days off from school around some of these holidays?
So I think in the long run, certainly personally, I would be interested in understanding if there was a capacity to use some of the PL days, for example, on days where we notice a significant absence of children from a particular demographic, where we wouldn't be then expecting them to attend anyway, and perhaps, that would be an effective use for our time. At this point, that's not my request. My request is simply an informational document to create for schools to reference. In my experience, school staff work really hard at inclusion and really try to acknowledge the family life of their students, and often have a hard time finding accurate information that they can use to welcome students of a variety of faiths in particular, and then sometimes face confusion or stumbling blocks when those students are absent or are celebrating something that the teacher may not have a lot of experience with. And this would simply be a way for us as a division to systematically approach that challenge.
Go ahead, Andrea.
And I just wanted to say thank you for all the research you've done on this. And I think that teachers would welcome knowing about all of these important dates for the children.
Craig?
Yeah, just another follow-up question. As part of your presentation, are you suggesting that teachers in the school time talk about these holidays? Because we are a secular school, and although we celebrate Christian holidays, most schools don't allow us to talk about that openly. So I'm just wondering if that's your goal. I'm in favor of acknowledging these different holidays, but I'm just concerned that if we start teaching about those holidays in school, then other people could say, well, then why can't we teach about the Christian religion? So, that's probably could happen. So I'm just wondering if it's just like instruct the teachers to recognize these days, say, this is a holiday, and leave it at that, or are we going to teach more? And I guess that's the question. Thanks.
I would say that the board has no business in telling teachers what they teach. And so I would certainly leave that to teachers. They have their requirements through their own, backgrounds and requirements for their license. Again, I would just say that this is simply a guiding document to let school staff know that probably over 10% of our families don't celebrate the holidays that are listed on our current calendar. And in acknowledgement that because of that default, we force students and staff to make really hard choices that could be made a little bit easier with awareness. And so I would say that this doesn't inform instruction in any way beyond what each teacher chooses to do with their own school.
You've had your 2 speaking times, but if it's quick, I'll certainly let you.
It is quick.
Perfect.
How would the human resources, if a teacher was one of these faced and wanted to take the day off, would they get paid, or would it have to be a personal leave of absence?
There's provisions in the collective agreement for those sorts of things. There are general personal days, and so folks who are in that situation will often plan to use those personal days on whatever day they choose. So yes, there are definitely clauses in the collective agreement that are open enough that somebody could choose to take a personal day that day.
Thank you. Christina, are you looking to make a motion on these? Okay, you want to go ahead?
I'd like to move that the Lethbridge School Division use the attached multi-faith calendar generated by Edmonton Public School Division as a model for developing a multi-faith calendar for 2022-2023 that will be made available to students and families on the division website, provided to schools to reference when planning events such as exams, project deadlines, or parent events to avoid holy days, and accompanied with information on best practices for supporting students who are absent from school for religious reasons in accordance with Education Act 7.4 and updated annually.
Thank you.
I just want to double check. I think I mixed up those dates. I think this is the old motion. Is the 2022-2023 the date that we discussed?
I think that that's correct, as in their guiding of the exams and the project deadlines and pieces. And I think that the date for the actual calendar is in the next one.
Right, so the 22-23 gives opportunity for the
The
division
time, yes,
to
perfect.
to
Okay.
research.
I just
that
wanted
as
to
well.
make sure
Yeah,
that
so
was,
that's
yes,
good.
okay,
So
great, thank
provide
you.
the time.
A year, sorry. I got so confused with the calendars. So, like I said before I rambled, that's the motion.
Okay. Thank you. So any further questions or comments? Seeing none. Oh, Tyler.
So Cheryl, you have a calendar committee, correct? So will this go to the calendar committee to do this, or where will this be constructed?
How is it be constructed? So the calendar committee, and I should have mentioned that when I presented the calendar, so I apologize for that, because certainly I don't develop the calendar in isolation. We have a calendar committee that's comprised of parents, administrators, memberships from ATA and our 2 QP unions. So that would not really be the committee that would necessarily be would move forward with really this is an informational calendar that can enrich the understanding of staff at schools. And so it's likely that we would like what Edmonton Public did, and that's why I certainly support sort of using them as somewhat of a model. They hired or contracted sort of a cultural expert to so they connected. So Edmonton's calendar is quite specific to Edmonton, right? And so in other words, that person did sort of research what cultures are in this. So, you know, get someone who would set a framework for how we go about determining religions, first of all. And then, of course, from those religions, who could represent and properly inform us of the holidays for those religions. And then from there, have a calendar, and then have those individuals also provide, you know, resources or links or some insight in terms of, you know, what are some things that would be helpful for our teachers to know about and think about to provide our students. And so by mentioning 22-23, that does give opportunity from now until the spring, right, for you know, to take a look at someone who might be able to navigate that and work with members of the community to construct a calendar that would be meaningful for Lethbridge. If that's sort of what you're thinking.
Does that help, Tyler? Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Those in favor of the motion? And that's carried. And then did you have another motion? You're going to leave it at that? Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to Legion request for letter support. Cheryl.
And as provided for in the trustee package, we had received correspondence from Warrant Officer Glenn Miller, who represented a request from the Legion Banner Committee. Glenn Miller explained that the Legion plans to go to the City of Lethbridge in the new year to request support for putting up banners in the City of Lethbridge that recognize, that salute veterans that are from the geographic area, specifically the city of Lethbridge. And so the Legion, what they're asking for is a letter supporting the concept. This is not asking for funds to support a banner. So what they're looking for is, are there organizations that support the idea of having a banner project in our city to salute our veterans? And so that's really the request. And so if the trustees voted in favor of this, then a letter would be written. Allison would work on that with myself, and we'd write a letter to the city expressing support for the project.
Thank you. Sorry, there's just some issue with the live streaming, so Garrett's got it working, but some people are having issues. So, okay, so Cheryl, thank you for that information. Are there questions? Craig.
Yeah. At first, it just sounded like a letter, but then I noticed that in the back side of that page, the second paragraph from the last, it says, this is a great opportunity for sponsors such as families or organizations such as yours to secure a limited number of banners in the first year. So would we, I don't know what the cost of it would be, but should we have two separate motions if we decide later to support a banner?
And that could come later, because I did, because I thought that might be asked, right? Like, well, how much does it cost for a banner? Do we want to do that? So did contact Glenn, and at this time he doesn't know what the cost would be or what that will look like. But if the concept goes through with the city, then this is sort of a generic letter, he explained, and that there would be opportunity in the future, certainly, that if this is approved by the city as a concept, to move forward to be installed sort of on the lamp posts in the city, that opportunity for sponsorship we could certainly bring back to the board.
Further questions or comments? Tyler and then Andrea. Andrea, go ahead.
Oh, well, General Stewart, very dear to me, and this is the Legion that has used to bus our children over to the Legion for Remembrance Day. So that was a very special relationship. So I would be very much in support of this project.
Thank you, Andrea. Tyler?
I think she kind of helped me in answering it, but I was just thinking this should have a pretty significant connection with our social studies program at various grades. I'm not exactly sure what grades these are all taught at nowadays, but this would have a fairly heavy educational connection to our curriculum and certain social things, right? Okay, if I'm good with that, then I totally support it.
Okay, seeing no further questions, is there somebody that would like to make the motion? Andrea, go ahead.
I motion that the board approve a letter of support for the Lethbridge Legion banner project to the City of Lethbridge Mayor and Council.
Thank you. No further questions or comments? Those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next, we have the committee terms of reference. So we had worked through these and made some amendments. So at this point, I don't know that Cheryl has much that she needs to say, or we can just move on to making these motions.
Well, I believe that, certainly the board engaged in conversations about what they felt might look best for their committee terms of reference. And so I think unless there's questions, that each one would certainly require a separate motion, and I think you can just proceed through those.
Excellent. So if somebody can make the first motion, and then I'll call for questions. Andrea, go ahead.
I motion that the board approve the board audit committee terms of reference as amended.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? That's carried. And then the second motion. Jenny, go ahead.
I motion that the board approve the Division Wellness Committee terms of reference as amended.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? And those in favor? And that's carried. And then the third one. Oh, go ahead, Craig.
Just a question.
Yep.
We didn't change anything in this, did we?
In policy advisory.
Yeah, 'cause
I
it's
know that
just
we
one-
left.
one trustee.
Yeah, one trustee and one alternate.
Okay, because it's the same as what we had.
Go ahead,
before.
Cheryl.
The only change to that was clarification of that the board member was the committee chair, not the chair of the board.
Okay.
Right.
I so move that we adopt the Policy Advisory Committee terms of reference as amended.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? And that's carried. And one last one. Christina?
I move that the board approve the Poverty Intervention Committee terms of reference as amended.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? And that's carried. Perfect. And now we have 6.7 board meeting times. Craig?
I'll make the motion and then I'll discuss it.
Okay.
I move that we adopt different meeting times for the board meetings. And it be in place by January of our next board meeting. And I move that the board, and part of that motion is that the board will decide the times. And the reason for this is that I think we've discovered that this board is quite a bit different than the last board, and that our discussions take a little longer and might be a little more in depth because we do have trouble getting in 3.5 hours. And I think there's lots of material there that to do our due diligence as trustees, we probably need to discuss, we need a little longer times. But I'm also concerned about the toll that it is on our staff, that they come to work at 8 o'clock, 7, and they're here till 8:30, which is not healthy for them. Probably not healthy for us at night. So I would propose that we change it so that we're meeting in the morning at 10 o'clock, for instance, and that we take a break at 12, and then we come back and we meet till 5:30. That gives us about 6.5 hours to discuss everything. And if I look at the last 2 meetings, that's about how long it took. And I really think that that shows the public also that we're endeavoring to be responsible to them by discussing things openly and asking questions and clarifying things. And so I just think that we need to move to that. And I did go on, my wife has watched because she wants to see me on TV. There were 3 people on the first meeting and 2 on the second meeting. Now, it's interesting though, after the meeting is done, the next 24 hours, there's 35, 45, 55 people. So it would indicate to me that most people aren't watching us during the time that we're here. They're going to watch afterwards, and they can fast forward when they want to. The second thing is that we can still have public presentations later in the afternoon for everybody. And the majority of school boards, I did check, do that. They do meet in the morning to the afternoon. So I think it would be just looking at the overall situation of what we do and how we're doing it, that would make more sense to do it that way. Thanks.
Okay, looking for comments or questions. Christina?
I'd be interested to know what the Division School Council thinks as some of the engaged in terms of, I would like to hear feedback from those who are interested in watching, what would be available. And I also think out of recognition that we have, if we were to do it in the daytime, staff in particular would not be able to, because we do hope that they're in class.
Okay. Tyler?
Oh, number of things. So first, I would say, Craig, you're going to need to bring a concrete motion that says you want meetings to start at this time, operate for this period of time to this period of time. I don't think we can make a motion that is just we choose something at some point. So I'll need you to revise that. Second of all, the daytime meetings, the reason that they aren't any earlier is because for people who have other commitments during the day that either work or have family or have whatever the case may be, it's not as easy to get away at 10 in the morning and then maybe take a break here and come back. So it doesn't really work well for that. I don't know how public forum is going to work because in my mind, that still needs to be a regular after general work type of time for that to be. So then if we start at 10 something, now our meetings are 8 hours long during the day. So the way our meetings work now is that we still get our work in. So if it goes from 2, if it goes till 8, it goes till 8. So we're still getting it in. I don't see that as being as problematic as you might for the other thing. What I would say is that having been on various different boards now, I would say that out of the gates, our meetings are not very efficient. And I would rather us have more efficient meetings than extend meeting times to try and accommodate an inefficient meeting. That's what I would say. So I would be, at this point, unless you come up with something of an actual concrete schedule, what you're looking at, I would be against this motion.
Thank you, Tyler. Jenny?
With this, like pertaining to this discussion, where are we at with public interaction with these meetings? Are they allowed to attend in person up to a certain capacity? Are they allowed to speak over Zoom to us during these? Like if we're making concessions to try to make this available to the public to be directly involved, what does that currently look like? I know there's been some discussion of that, but I'm not sure that I'm aware of any concrete plan for that I'm aware of, which I'm acknowledging is maybe my own lack of awareness.
I know I'd certainly brought it up at the last meeting that it's something that as a board we need to have a discussion in regards to public presence and public being allowed to come. What I can say, knowing that over the last number of years I attended a lot of the board meetings as a public member, I was often the only one. I was often the only one sitting in here attending as a public member. So it definitely is great that we have the engagement when people are. I do think whenever we do go to open for public to be able to come watch, I think that it's important that we continue knowing that our public is watching and going back and watching. I think it's a great way for us to engage. But at this point, I believe there's been no decision made by our board to allow public into the room, but I had brought it up for us to look at further consideration of that. But there is public forum at 5 currently, and I could see that going forward, that we would always need to, as Tyler said, make sure that that's outside of a regular working hours. I think that public forum piece would still need to be there because that is a time when public often did come. They would come present for that part and leave.
So sorry to follow up, then we currently do not have a policy right now for public in person.
We don't have anything within our COVID plan or pandemic plan to allow for public in terms of there being a policy. I don't know that there was ever a policy to remove public from being able to come, but it's part of the pandemic plan, unless somebody's going to correct me otherwise. From previous board, this was the direction that, and this board has not had a discussion of public being allowed to attend in person.
I know I've spoken twice, so I just, and I don't want to take away from where you're going, but I think it's pertinent to mention I did have a couple of parents call and ask about attending today, and I deferred them to Garrett because I wasn't sure what to do. So I'm not sure if we need to follow up with that somehow, if they're attending in person or virtually today. I'm not sure. But I would support daytime meetings as well. I think that we don't have, I think Allison was here alone a lot for years and years and years. I think that the assessment that parents are watching when at their own convenience rather than participating directly in real time is a pretty accurate assessment. And I do believe that we should allow ourselves whatever time we may need, but for sure take an effort to be very efficient and effective in our conversation and in our topics of discussion. But I am in favor of daytime meetings.
Okay, I'd certainly like to hear from Andrea and Christine.
Because I don't work, I would really like to hear from the board members who do work now. And I do see both sides, because we have division staff who are here for 12 or more hours. And I do appreciate that there are board members who work.
Okay, Christine?
Yeah, I think that, there's a couple things. I agree with Tyler on the efficiency piece. And I also agree with Craig in that we need to take necessary time to discuss the issues at hand. But all the time that we take needs to be also productive. And so I think we need to continue to work on that as a board. I agree with Christina. I would appreciate hearing feedback from Division School Council and members that would be attending, potentially attending during the day. And I would actually also like to hear from our Executive Council if this is to shift the time back 3 hours, carves 3 hours out of their day. And so I would like to hear how that would affect your day on average. I know today was an anomaly, thankfully. Would you have been able to be present today if we started at 10 o'clock? So I would appreciate hearing executives' perspective on shifting the time.
Okay, just going with Andrea, getting some echo. Okay, Andrea's comment in regards to those of us that work outside of the home. Christina, did you want to answer that, or you're good? Okay. And for myself, I do work, but I'm able to, my employer supported me in running for trusteeship, and I certainly am able to flex that time. So that's not an impact. I'll turn it over for Executive Council.
Sorry, did I totally cut Christina off? I heard Christine, not Christina. Did you say Christina, Allison?
I was going for you. You were good.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
And certainly Executive Council wouldn't presume to sort of influence or direct what the board members believe to be the most optimum timelines for their meetings. I mean, really, if we know when the meetings are going to start and end, then we simply would have to change that. Currently, I would suggest that probably all of us have commitments in the mornings, because it's very rare you would find openings in our calendars for a half a day. But that's not to say that if the board makes whatever decision, that we make that work. And so, and we make work whatever the board does moving. If it takes time into the evening, certainly that's not unusual for us to be working in the evening. And so it's, really a board decision, and Executive Council works with that board decision.
Okay. I will just add my comments in that I do agree with my colleagues in regards to that efficiency, as well as ensuring that we do have the wholesome discussions. That I think there's definitely some pieces that we can narrow down for sure as we move forward. I do agree that we need to look at when we have staff in that have been in the building since 7:30 and 8 o'clock. feel bad for them having to stay late. And one thing that I have noticed as we have run late is we're rushing. We're then rushing with those last agenda items, or we're getting shorter reports and things like that. So that is one consideration that I would have in when we have the later meetings, is that it's not, are we cutting pieces off when it runs that late? So Craig?
Well, I'd be willing to make a slight change to my motion in that we have an ad hoc committee of the board look at meeting times and to present their findings back to the board. And the reason that I see we've got issues on both sides. We have some people that are caught in the middle. We have some people that are favoring that, and then others that aren't so sure. So I would say that if we had a subcommittee, an ad hoc committee, that we could look at different things and come back to the board in January with a concrete proposal as per Tyler, the times of the meeting. It would also give us time to check out some different situations. I would agree too that we can become more efficient, but again, I just can't see us being able to do a whole meeting with a division that's got as many employees and as much money that we can make absolutely great decisions in 3.5 hours, because it just takes time to discuss and make sure we're on the right track. So I would move that we develop a subcommittee to look at meeting times and to report back to the board, an ad hoc subcommittee.
Okay, so you already have a motion on the floor, so I need you to do something with your
I'll
original.
revise the first motion.
Okay.
I'll rescind it and bring that forward, that one, that we have an ad hoc committee of the board to look at meeting times and report back to the board.
Okay. Leanne, are you good with that? Okay. So further questions or comments, and if we can keep them brief. Go ahead, Tyler.
And just clarification, do we need to say in the motion who's sitting on this ad hoc committee? Like, how is there of 2 trustees and the superintendent, or what, or do we not need to? It doesn't matter.
I'd like some clarity on that ad hoc committee as well.
I would say 3 trustees and a designate from the admin team.
Okay. Further comments or questions? Okay, those in favor of the motion and those opposed? You do have to vote, Christina. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Okay, so you were in favor? Sorry. Okay, so that is carried unanimously. So in terms of that, are there 3 people that are interested in being on that ad hoc committee? So I have Craig, Christina. Come on, Andrea. There we go. We have our 3. Oh, sorry, Christine.
I did have my hand up, but if Andrea would like to be on it, she can be on it.
Okay, so with Christina being a working party, I'd certainly like to see her on there if you're comfortable with staying on. Okay, and Andrea, you're good?
Whatever you would like, Christine.
It's Christina. You guys duke it out.
I believe Christina wants to stay on.
Christina's for
and
sure on,
Craig.
Craig's on.
And so Christine Light, whatever you would like.
Allison called you first, Andrea. You can be on it. It is fine.
Okay, so we have Craig, Christina, and Andrea, and that will be, and please have the report ready so that we can have it in our board package for our January board meeting so that other trustees can take a look at that information. And then you can work together with one of the executive council. Thank you. Is one of you going to take the lead on that to do the organizing? Craig, you're going to do the organizing? Okay, thank you. Perfect. So next is 6.8 REP. Jenny.
I recognize that we are running behind schedule, so
knowing that we are 2 minutes, 1 minute from public forum, are you okay if we hold off on that motion and we go ahead with we actually need to go ahead with, or
Sure.
not motion, with your comments, can we
Yeah.
go ahead with public forum?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is that we do have public that are wishing to speak. So I will go ahead. Do we have 1 or 2? So we have Alex, and is there a second one, Garrett? Who's Dave?
I'm willing to speak. This is David Lowry.
Okay, so is there one that's going to go first, Garrett? Okay, so go ahead. I'll start with Alex, if you're ready to go.
Hi. Yes, thank you. This is my first experience here, so bear with me. I just wanted to start off by, I did submit an appeal today by email, so I hope that you've had that opportunity. But I wanted to formally appeal some of our current COVID procedures that we have within the school district. With the current changes from AHS and Alberta government commencing on the 10th of December, allowing schools to now use the restrictions exemption program, I would love, and I'm encouraging that we will be able to also adapt this in our schools with the principals and board members allowing this to occur in our district. That is my appeal. I would like to start off by asking who here, if you can raise your hand, has been to a movie recently or gone out for dinner, who's been to a concert, a hockey game, maybe a theatrical performance. Anyone in the room been to any of those things? Awesome. The QR code that you were asked for enabled you to be able to enjoy those events. And those bring us joy and give us an opportunity to gather and be with people and enjoy things in life that are fun and can make us happy. And so those are so important in life, as we know. And being able to do that within our schools in the same way to support our children seems to me very logical and very doable. So not only for us to enjoy ourselves watching them, but for also to give them the support that they need as students who work hard at their, maybe it's an instrument that they play, or they're in a play, or they're singing, or they're playing a sport. All of those things are so important to support our children in that way. And if we can do that now through this new date of that the government has put forth on the 10th, that I feel like we should adopt this within our school district. I feel that there's no measuring stick really in place, and that sometimes it's feelings. And I really would encourage us to use the guidance we've been given by experts within Alberta Health Services and within our government to make these choices that will benefit families and children. No longer the 1/3 capacity we're going for right now. It's two spectators per child, and that causes some difficulty for sure with concerts coming up, Christmas concerts or games or different performances. It's really hard to choose which two children or which two spectators can attend. Sometimes it can be even trouble with younger children that babysitters have to be hired for parents to attend, and it's just difficult. And in my opinion, and just watching how things are transpiring through the province, it seems very reasonable to adapt with what they've suggested, that we can use a QR code at the door to come into these events. I know there's probably questions as to how that would happen with staffing, if it's, requirements by the teachers and parents. I know parents that I've spoken with would be very willing to help with these types of efforts so that people who would like to come into these different events would be able to come in and support these kids in this way. Our facilities are designed to be able to accommodate large crowds, And each student should be allowed to experience this in their own school, a normal school experience. I think it's so important. Recently, I've been able to go to another school and watch with a few other family members my child play, and that was great. But I really would love to be able to do it in my child's school, where we can be there with all of my children, supporting them. It's so important, I feel. We need to be able to support each other, and a whole household should be able to attend these events to support all family members. I feel that allowing extended family members also is super important for these kids. It helps foster family relationships. And I know in my own children, I have 4 children, and I've had the experience to go through some different sporting events and other things where some spectators could come and other times when they couldn't. And the difference in the children and their dedication and what they're learning is so much greater when they can have the support of the parents, of extended family, siblings. It's just so much more beneficial. And now with the guidance from our government and Alberta Health Services, I don't see why we can't move forward with these new procedures. And I know we can make it work. As parents, we're very devoted to our kids, and we would be very willing to put forth the extra work that might be there to make that happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for your comments today. I know that we certainly are going to be having some discussion on our REP program, and I certainly invite you to listen into the rest of the board meeting, and we'll follow up with you with your concern that you've brought forward, and we'll take that into careful consideration of what you've said today and provide a response in the near future. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And moving on to David Lowry. Go ahead, David.
Hi, thank you. I'm definitely going to echo the sentiments of Alex here, who went before me. I did send an email. I was kind of pressed for time at work today, so it came in quite a bit later, like pretty close to when this meeting started. So you probably haven't had a chance to see it, but I will read at least some sections from it just to express some of my views. I'm also requesting to formally appeal and ask for a revision of the Lethbridge School District 51's current COVID restriction procedures in regards to spectator attendance at extracurricular events and performances. As of December 10th, 2021, per the Chief Medical Officer of Health Order 54-2021, Alberta Health Services and the Alberta government are allowing schools to use the restriction exemption program, which allows for in-scope entities and events to have those patrons or attendees that wish to attend to do so without most public health restrictions as outlined in the previous Order 52-2021, which has now been modified by Order 54-2021. The original order did not provide for spectators for school extracurricular activities K through 12, including activities at a school or other facility, to be part of the in-scope group, but the revised order does. And if you go to the Alberta link, which I've sent in my email that you can look at your leisure, but that kind of talks about the REP program. It specifically states that the restrictions exemption program permits in-scope business entities and organizers to operate without most public health restrictions as outlined in Order 52-2021, although masks are still mandatory for indoors, which we fully expect that. And then it mentions that operators that are out of scope or choose not to fully implement the program must comply with all public health restrictions outlined in Order 44-2021, which was modified by Order 53-2021. And this Order 44-2021 is the one that specifically sets out the requirement for a limitation of up to 1/3 of fire code capacity. And previously we were out of scope. So, I mean, that made sense to have that restriction still be in place. But now that spectators for those activities are considered to be in scope, so long as, we meet the other requirements of the REP program in terms of proof of vaccination or a negative test within 72 hours, or an exemption letter by a qualified medical practitioner, and having proof of ID, etc. I think we need to have our division make a change to follow the guidance that's been laid out by the Chief Medical Officer of Health in our Alberta government. It seems that we've kind of implemented a sort of REP program that's very similar anyways that we've been doing at school, because we have had use of some of these QR codes prior to being able to attend as parents to see our children participate in some of these extracurricular activities. And I fully recognize that, there was a letter sent out November 25th, which Superintendent Cheryl Gilmore stated that the facility cannot have more than 1/3 of the spectator capacity, and it laid out some of the different considerations of why some of the spectator capacity is kind of weird, like depending on who they think will be there and how big the space is and that kind of thing. But this statement, although true at the time when that letter came out on November 25th, 2021, because that spectators for school extracurricular activities was out of scope, is now no longer the case. The REP program can be fully adhered to because spectators for school extracurricular activities are now part of the in-scope group, and the 1/3 of spectator capacity restriction should no longer be applicable, since fully conforming to the REP program excludes the participant from having to comply with all of the public health restrictions outlined in Order 44-2021. And it's a subsection 9.1 is where you see that 1/3 capacity restriction that's in that order, that now, if we fully are following the revised order that's been given, we don't have to worry about anymore. So I am requesting formally that Lethbridge School District 51 administration and board members fully allow the REP program to be implemented, which, like I said before, we're almost pretty much doing already to some degree, just maybe with not as many people, and remove the unnecessary restrictions in terms of capacity restriction, and allow for more spectators to be able to attend as long as they are compliant with the REP program. And we've seen our neighbors kind of to the south-ish of us in West Winds make a very similar change, and they've allowed, in fact, schools to kind of have the freedom to be able to decide if that makes sense for them to institute the REP program and allow for people to participate in the same way that, as Alex pointed out, we have been doing have been allowed to do in the general public for people going to restaurants or movies or other activities or things like that. Being a former School District 51 athlete and a current coach and working with these kids all the time, like, I know that these young people, they want to be able to look up into the crowd and see the support, both from friends and family. And I think we're at a point now where it makes sense to move forward and implement, just follow the guidance that's been given to us by the province and not do more than what is required. I think we should be looking for opportunities to do as much as we can with the guidance that's been given to us. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for your comments today. As I said to Alex, the board certainly plans to have some discussion on this, and we appreciate your comments and your bringing forward to express your concern. We can assure you that we'll take them into consideration and that we'll be able to provide a response to you in the near future. I encourage you as well to stay and watch the rest of the meeting that's available to you online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So moving on to 6.8 REP.
Well, if I'd realized we were going to have such an eloquent representation of so much, I wouldn't have prepared so hard. I just wanted to open up a discussion and make a recommendation. I'll give you just the quick discussion. I recognize that we're running behind time on our schedule. So I think that we have had extensive discussion with these COVID and the REP for our schools, and supporting our teachers and supporting our administrators and supporting our students, and also hearing the community. And we've had these extensive conversations. And from that, what I have drawn is that we are trying to support our staff and that we are trying to do what's best for our students. And so I think that we have very good intentions, and everybody is working very hard toward good solutions. And so with that, in the spirit of supporting our schools and our administrators and recognizing their own ability to assess the needs of their schools and the communities of their schools, my thought was to make a recommendation So I wrote, I would like to recommend that the Lethbridge School Division REP adjust to allow school administrators the option to implement the REP as outlined by the provincial government. And so with that, I recognize what we have right now already gives some flexibility to administrators, but I don't recognize in there that it gives them the ability to move in the other direction. It allows them to create further strategies. And so maybe it would include implementing the RP as outlined by the provincial government. I'm not sure specifically if that would allow that or not. But my recommendation is that maybe we allow those administrators to have that further autonomy in determining and developing strategies specific to their individual schools, and to look at the needs of their schools and their staff and their students, and to say, I think that we are at a point where we can implement the REP as it is outlined by the provincial government, supported by AHS in conjunction with the Minister of Health, and be allowed to implement those within their school. Thoughts?
Just so I can be clear, you made a motion?
I made a recommendation.
Recommendation. Okay, thank you. Just needed to make sure if Leanne needed to be writing anything down. Okay, so I see Cheryl would like to go first. Go ahead.
The Lethbridge School Division Restriction Exemption Program available on the website. When it talks on F in the sections F and G, state that further implementation strategies specific to the sport activity will be developed by schools and reviewed by the school division superintendent or designate. So I'm not sure what's different necessarily, because certainly the restriction exemption, Lethbridge School Division restriction exemption program provides for the decision-making of strategies is school-driven. And that's the way it's been throughout the entire fall. The decisions to implement the number of spectators, the decisions to implement the way that the restriction exemption program is implemented has been entirely school-driven. It's been based on recommendations collectively from principals at middle school level and high school level. So it has not been central office administration driven. It has not been board driven. It's been school driven, and all principals at those levels have fully endorsed and supported the decisions that have been made thus far. I know that this particular Lethbridge School Division restriction exemption program provides for that autonomy moving forward for them to move towards what would be no further restrictions than what is outlined in the provincial restriction exemption program. And so how it's written now does provide for that opportunity at a school level. And certainly, as is the case in most sort of collective decisions or jurisdictions, I know that our principals at the high school level and middle school level do plan to meet in the new year and review and make decisions moving forward. Our schools and our communication from our schools have been very forthright in what their priorities are. They've said our priorities are student participation, health and well-being of students and community members, and embracing spectators and trying to accommodate spectators to support their children in school. So certainly I know that schools and school administrators desire and understand the benefit of their kids being supported. And the way that the program is written now does provide for movement towards that decision as they continue to review their circumstance. I'm always mindful that extracurricular is a site-based activity grounded in volunteerism and closest to the responsibility of the administrators at the school level.
Other comments? Tyler.
Okay, thank you, Cheryl. I think that's a good explanation. I think there's just some confusion around what's going on with extracurricular and co-curricular, in that originally in the height of the pandemic, when the pandemic plan came in, there were restrictions on non-essential things that happened within the division. And during that time, extracurricular and co-curricular were deemed non-essential. Now, as we all know, they are essential to a lot of things in kids' lives and health and happiness and whatnot. So the previous board, back in June, prior to the summer break, was the board took out anything to do with restrictions to extracurricular and co-curricular at that time in June, because we wanted to look forward to the fall to make sure that sports could get going, like football, volleyball, and that thing, without it being tied up. Should football practice or one of those need to start in August, something like that. So I think it's important to just clear up the confusion that the board and the division itself is not restricting the activities that are going on there. And I think that Cheryl covered everything else excellently in what's going on. So just so everyone is aware, that is how it's going. And unfortunately, I do think there's just some confusion out there as to what restrictions are really in place. So,
Craig?
Yeah, I kind of agree that with the presentations, I agree with them, and I agree with what the government has just, that last order that they gave us. I agree with Tyler, there's some confusion out there, and I can't see a problem with the board encouraging the administrators to move as quickly as possible to implement the new RAP program. That's not dictating any, it's just an encouragement. So we're not getting involved with their operations. We're staying out of that. But we as a board, because we represent parents and the public, can make a recommendation or something that we encourage that they move as quickly as possible. Because, and I know how bureaucracy works, let's wait a couple of weeks, and then pretty soon we've lost the basketball season. And especially kids that are in grade 12, their grandparents haven't been able to come, their family members haven't been able to come, and then we're back into another sport. So I just think that we could encourage the principals to move as quickly as possible to this new program. Thanks.
Other comments? Are you wanting to close or go with your second comment? Because I want to make some comments too.
You go.
Good? Okay, sounds good. So I know, not being on the board over the majority of this last year, hearing from the public in regards to people wanting to know, well, then how will we know that we're at the next step? And how will we know when we're there, when parents were wanting extracurricular to open up even, and now it's the spectator piece. So I'm wondering, Cheryl, and I don't know if you have an answer to this, but I know that you just said now that the administrators will be meeting in the new year. Do you know, how will we know when they meet in the new year? Obviously, it's going to be concerning when families are going home for Christmas and then they're coming back. So I can certainly see that concern, and certainly hearing Craig in regards to when will that next process be? Do you know what it's at that after they meet in January? Do you know is there a measure or anything that would allow us to be able to say that, if we have this, then we would be able to move forward more, or is there anything more that you could put in place?
And so I just want to clarify a few things as well before addressing that question. So what's being referred to as the new order from Alberta Health, really with respect to Lethbridge School Division Restriction Exemption Program, it doesn't really change anything with that. Because right in this new order that's been put out December 10th, it lists explicitly, in other words, it's in the list of included as part of organizations that can belong to the restriction exemption. That's explicit. But certainly when Lethbridge School Division, when football season started in the fall, we, in consultation with Alberta Education, we had made assumptions, and with support of Alberta Education, that we fell under the restriction exemption program for co-curricular and extracurricular activities. So the December 10th piece, we've been doing all of that really since September, because we wrote our restriction exemption program based on the public health order at that time, making assumptions that even though it wasn't explicitly stated in the order, that extracurricular and co-curricular fell under those organizations endorsed to follow that program, we did so. And so the one piece that was in addition, like some businesses have, more or less, more rigorous, for example, implementation of the protocol. So some businesses are saying, no, you have to be double vaccinated. We don't accept the proof of COVID negative testing. And so certainly what the restriction exemption program does and what that order does is set a standard of the minimum standard. And from there, like our restriction exemption program does, provides latitude or some room for additional measures. And so that's what's there. And so the order that came out on December 10th really doesn't change what we have for restriction exemption program. In other words, our program was written in a way that would accommodate changes to that order along the way, anticipating that there would be changes to that order along the way. So just wanted to clarify that our restriction exemption program still does follow the orders, and it followed the original order, and it follows the order as updated on December 10th. The school administrators, I meet with the secondary school administrators every 8 to 10 days, certainly to discuss where they're at. We plan on the administrators expressed at our meeting late last week that they wanted to take a look at what the Christmas season did for the trends in cases. And what that means, administrators of the schools, is that they would like to meet the second week back from holidays, so that they can get a sense of what that looks like for the trends in cases in their schools and as well in the community. As has been the case, all along, is there when people ask, well, what is the magic combination of factors that contribute to our school administrators making the decision to move forward? Certainly, as I said, the factors that they consider each and every time is, are we making sure that student athletes or student performers can continue with the activity? Are we making sure that we're keeping our students safe? And are we trying to move forward with spectators being able to engage with their children across the province? Certainly, it's been implemented differently. We still have some schools in Calgary and Edmonton who allow 0 spectators. We've got a lot of schools in the south who allow some spectators, as our schools have done. And recently, there's been some school jurisdictions, Medicine Hat would be one, Westwinds would be the other, who are saying that they're going to put the restrictions exemption in and allow spectators to capacity. And certainly all of those different decisions look at different factors. And so again, with extracurricular, co-curricular traditionally falling within the jurisdiction and realm of school administrators, I trust their wisdom. I trust their insight in terms of what their school capacity is to implement programs. And I trust their genuine interest in trying to move along the continuum of welcoming more spectators in their schools. They've been entrusted with extracurricular, co-curricular for decades. They do a phenomenal job. They support kids. They love kids. They really try to make sure that things work for them, and they embrace families being part of their children's experience. And so they will be meeting the second week back from school, and certainly taking a look at whether the trend continues stable or down, and then making decisions to further open things up as is provided for in how it's currently written in Lethbridge School Division Restriction Exemption Program.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? I see Andrea.
I just wanted to say that I so appreciate the volunteer aspect of it and all the hours that they put into all of the sports and the musicals and the plays and the concerts. And I think it's really important for them to have autonomy in moving through it as they feel comfortable in their facility.
Not seeing other comments. Are you going to speak again, Jenny?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that this is a good discussion with a lot of good points, and I think that the thing that has changed with the latest public order is that previous to December 10th, even though our own individual restrictions program for the Lethbridge School Division, even though that allowed for flexibility and development of strategy at school level, we were still restricted by the province in the fact that we weren't allowed to be more than 1/3 capacity, and we weren't allowed to fully use the restriction exemption program as it is outlined by the province. We were considered out of scope, and so we're unable to access that same program that other businesses and things were allowed to access. And so with that change in this latest health order, with the government moving extracurricular activities from the out of scope category and into the category of eligibility for the REP, as outlined by the province, just for clarity's sake, my thought is, and I don't know if it's appropriate to make a motion or to make a recommendation. I'm not sure what's appropriate here. And so maybe I can tell you my thought and you guys can maybe help me develop how to properly present it. But what my thought is that to further clarify communication on this, that we provide correspondence indicating the most recent Alberta government public health order has shifted extracurricular activities to create eligibility under the REP and indicate to administrators that the division supports strategies developed by schools, including the new option to move to implementation of the REP as outlined by the Alberta government as administrators see fit, so that we can communicate to them that we support them in whatever strategy they choose, but also make them aware that their options have expanded.
And that's a recommendation that you're...
I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to make a motion about that because I don't know if it comes from the board or if it comes from the division. So this is where I'm not totally sure how to present this. I'm happy to make it a motion if that's appropriate. I will make it a recommendation. I'm looking for advice.
Okay. And as I'm hearing from over this way, it's to make a recommendation, but I'll let Cheryl go ahead.
Well, just want to, for the sake of accuracy, the new order does not change what our schools have had access to since the first order. The new order makes it explicit. In other words, it's listed. School extracurricular and co-curricular are listed in the order. We've had a restriction exemption program since the first order, making the assumption and having it endorsed by Alberta Education that our assumption was correct, that our co-curricular and extracurricular activities could properly fall under the restriction exemption program. So our schools, since our first draft of the restriction exemption program, so it's not a change for our schools because we've always fallen under the order as endorsed by Alberta Education and as communicated to schools. And so certainly, although for some school divisions who didn't implement a restriction exemption program, we did, and were supported under the assumption that extracurricular and co-curricular could belong under youth sport and activity. The new order, just for accuracy, does not change opportunities for our schools because that opportunity has been there since September.
So can you state your recommendation again? Because what I think I'm hearing from you is almost that it's that as a board, we would be saying that we're okay with that they're going forward, making their own decisions, and that
I want to create communication that says that, but that also specifically says if you want to follow the REP program from the province, you can, and we'll support you. If you don't want to, you don't have to, and we'll support you. So is that a motion? Like, is that correspondence appropriate to come from the board, or is that coming from the division?
And you can certainly make that as a recommendation. We would look for consensus around the room for sure. I'm just wanting to be clear on what your wording is so that the recommendation is clear and what your intent is. And what I feel that your intent is kind of honoring when, Andrea is talking about that uniqueness of the schools, that we're honoring those unique situations that I would want to ensure that that recommendation had that in it. So for me, I need to hear that again, and I'm seeing Christine would like to speak first.
I think we are following the REP of the province. We've given the option of the administrators to have further restrictions on that. That's what that, Cheryl, correct me, that bullet in those two is that they can further restrict. So they've always been able to. I think what you're trying to say is that you very much sort of what Craig was getting at earlier is that I think what you want to say, Jenny, is you support the administrator in their autonomy to best govern their how they manage their extracurricular program, but the board maybe encourages them to strongly consider expanding the ability of more spectators to come to the.
So strongly encourages is maybe the appropriate wording.
Or something like that, because I think that's really what you're saying. We're following it, but right now there's a cautious approach, right? And if you want them to fully open it up, I think you want to say we encourage them to seriously consider or something like that.
So the limitation of 2 spectators, that's coming from individual schools and there's nowhere from the board direction or the division direction that is listing a limit of 2 spectators? Okay. So, are you wanting to read this again?
I'd like you to read it again, and I just want to be clear for myself and for other board members to be able to hear what your intent is, and if it's that this is basically the message that the board is making clear that this is what we believe in, is if we are in favor of this, that's what it would mean. So I want to be clear, and I want other board members to clearly be able to hear what you're asking.
Somebody has their hand up on the screen. Is that?
Yeah, we at this point don't offer for the public to have input. So
go ahead. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I recommend, is what I'm doing right? Okay, I recommend that to further clarify communication, the division we provide correspondence indicating that the most recent public health order shifted extracurricular activities to further clarify eligibility under the REP and indicate to administrators that the division strongly encourages and supports strategies developed by schools, including the option to move to full implementation of the REP as outlined by the Alberta government. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I look for comments. I do have a comment, but Craig.
I would support that recommendation, and because I like I said before, I think when they see the REP program and under Lethbridge Public, they all automatically assume that it's the government, and this is clearly stating that we want to follow we would like them to follow, up to them, but we'd like them to follow the Government of Alberta REP program. I think also it would be valuable to give since not everyone reads the paper, but to give that information of the fully vaccinated people in Lethbridge to the administrators at the next meeting, because it does help. I mean, we have less than 15% of people that are not vaccinated in Lethbridge, fully vaccinated. And so I would like to make sure that that information is passed on to the administrators.
Thank you. And I see Christine Light's hand. Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you, Allison. So my question, Jenny, is, are you looking for clarity and communication, or are you looking for the division to delegate? Or are you looking for both? I just need clarity in that. And then I'll respond with with whatever you answer.
I'm looking for clarity of communication to clarify that this is something we support, whatever their strategy is, and that their options in their strategy are, so to clarify communication, that they have autonomy at their own individual level, and that that autonomy includes the support from us if they decide to open things up more than they currently are, or say somebody decides to close things up off even more, then they have that autonomy to do that, and they have our support with what they assess to be the needs at their school. And then by delegate, I'm not sure specifically what you're referring to being delegated. I'm looking to support the decisions at the school board level. So that is a delegation. So I would say both, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think so. Like I feel like there for sure can be more room for more words to clarification for administrators. I feel like in the plan, there is written support in the plan for administrators to implement for their sites, and I know they're working collaboratively together as a collective of administrators. I think so. I would support clear communication. I always support clear communication. My caution is in just coming into that tipping point of overreaching our role as a governance body. Yes, we can. Of course, we all want it to open. We all want to fill the stands with parents and students and have our communities coming together again and cheering on our students in band and fine arts and sports and all the things. But my caution is that delegating to administrators is not our job. And so I think if that is the intent, Jenny, I can't, or if that's part of the intent, I think I cannot support it because of that piece, because that's not our job to delegate. And whether it's delegating or strongly encouraging, however we word it, if the motivation is to overstep and micromanage, I would caution us as a board to do that. I think that breaks trust with administrators and breaks that relationship. But I would support clarity and communication for sure. Thank you. I just wanted to understand where you're coming from, Jenny.
I agree with what you said, and I'm comfortable with removing the word encourage if that more accurately conveys. I don't know.
So the comments that I was, that's okay. The comments that I was wanting to add after I heard from people is that if you could, when we look at good governance, we look at, we have one employee, and I'm wondering if there's a way that we could adjust the words where you have the words administrator to reflect that it's our information that we share with our superintendent, who would then be providing that information to administrators. So when I look at what you've said, I'd look for some cleaning up of and I understand the intent, and I always look at any motion or recommendation as the intent. But I think when we're putting those words in writing, I think that we need to look at our governance role, and we really need to look at who we direct that to, and that would be the superintendent. So is there a way that you could change the wording where you have administrators to have something that would be to the superintendent instead? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay. Can you, without responding for your final, is there something that you could clear up in that? Okay. Okay. So not seeing other come out there are Tyler, go ahead, and then Andrea.
Just going to say, I just wanted to hear yours first. I also think too, you need to clean up the start of it. It's just the part about speaking to the December 10th order and everything, that's all, it doesn't need to be in there, and it makes it more confusing than anything. As Cheryl's already explained, that doesn't really change anything for how our division operates the REP right now. So because it doesn't have anything to do with it, I think that part all needs to come out, because it just makes the whole thing longer and more confusing to anyone who's going to read it.
And Andrea?
And maybe you could start off with the appreciation of all of the events that they have had. And then I liked your wording when you say, we support you as you open up more, and we would also support you if you needed to pull back. Would that be more?
So I'm kind of hearing around the room that there's some desire to look at the clarity of communication piece. There's the desire to look at that we support that the uniqueness of each of our schools in what they are doing, and also the desire to say that we're okay and comfortable as a board if they choose to move forward with full implementation of the provincial REP. Are those kind of the three things that I'm hearing? If the administrators are comfortable with that, and that would be totally up to Cheryl as superintendent to be passing down as a message from the board, not so much a motion by any means or a direction, but just kind of where our board sits is those three pieces. Craig?
I just want a clarification so that in this recommendation, we would ask the superintendent to further clarify the communication, that part, so that it is through the superintendent that she's going to go to the administrators with those three levels, right?
Yep. That the recommendation would be that the superintendent would share that with the administrators, that the board supports those three pieces would be what I'm hearing from some consensus around the room. And we can certainly go back and ask again to ensure that that's kind of where we're at, but I'm seeing some nods of support in that. Jenny, are you ready with any words? Yep. So one is ensuring that there's clear communication. That would be communication out to the public and to families, to students and families. Two is that we support the uniqueness that each of the schools bring, and we support that they have unique decisions to make, and we support them in those decisions. And then the third is that we do support the REP program and full implementation if they choose to, like the provincial REP program, if any schools choose to go that route, that we support them in that. And Christina.
Sorry, I'm hesitant to jump in. I don't necessarily have a lot to say, but I just want to express that I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable with this recommendation, in that board members, even with a recommendation and not a motion, carry a lot of power. And I'm concerned making a encouragement or recommendation around something that's already articulated in a division document sends a confusing message, when I would prefer to see us just refer back to an existing document. Yeah, so I just want to express that I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable with the reach of this. Yeah.
Okay, so with that comment, this document is a document that was approved by the previous board. So would your intention be rather to see a change to this document that the previous board approved?
I would just prefer to affirm that we continue to have a document that outlines that school administrators have jurisdiction over the implementation of REP policies in their school. I think that we continue to agree with things that the division has already communicated. And while there may be challenges in our communication out to parents, that may be just a simple response saying, thank you, we hear that you're concerned about this. It is outlined in our existing documents that schools already do have the capacity to implement.
Jenny, did you hear those comments? Okay. Okay. Just making sure. Okay, so other comments, or you're ready for closing, Jenny?
I would say that I appreciate everyone's comments and this process of broadening perspectives. So thank you, everyone, for I value everything that I've heard, and hopefully have been able to incorporate that. I recognize what you're also saying, Christina, and I do feel like there is just a little bit of a need based on the environment of this topic in the community, that there's maybe a need for some further clarifying communication and more detailed communication. And so this isn't to discredit or supersede or my intention is not to reach beyond what has already been established, but just to hopefully provide more detailed communication in this. And so on that note, I'll close with my recommendation. And my recommendation is that in an effort to provide clarifying communication, I recommend that our superintendent provide correspondence expressing gratitude for volunteers and facilitators of extracurricular activities, and that our superintendent indicate to administrators that the division recognizes the uniqueness of individual schools and supports strategies developed within the schools, including the option to move to implementation of, full implementation of the REP program as outlined by the Alberta government.
Okay, so that's the recommendation. I'm looking for consensus around the room. So I'm seeing a nod there, seeing maybe a nod, Tyler. Okay. 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 Andrea. You're yes?
I'm a little on the fence too about the implementation of the REP program. Like,
As a comment, I reside with Christina and what she's saying. That's where I actually lie. But in what's being said is not. To me, there's nothing offensive about it in any way, shape, or form, and it's kind of really just reiterating what's going on. So I'm fine with it. That's what it takes to move on. Ready to move on.
And I certainly hear what Christina is saying as well, and I want to ensure that we ensure that the intent is where the intent is to lie with this recommendation. So for me, I support the recommendation in it. And Mike has something to say.
Yeah, sorry, just the one thing I'd say is that the conversation, just from my perspective, vacillated a little bit between we support moving forward with the REP, and then Jenny, I know you had mentioned we also support, putting in further restrictions. And I think when you read it, it didn't mention that, the recommendation, and that would be the one area that you might want to consider, because I think the conversation was, yeah, we support schools to have the autonomy to move forward towards the REP, which means allowing more spectators in, but we also support them if they think that they have to have less or have more restrictions, that sort of thing. And I think the way we have it written, I think it just talks about the REP. So I'm not sure if that was the intention or. Yeah.
So you're able to adjust that part?
Yeah, can I amend a recommendation? I don't know what that's called, but why don't we add, so including the option to move to implementation of the RMP as outlined by the Alberta government, or to implement further additional restrictions. Should we just say additional restrictions?
or restrictions as necessary.
Implement restrictions as necessary. I like that. Or to implement restrictions as necessary.
Is that what you were saying, Mike? No. No, wrong words. As deemed appropriate.
As deemed
Instead-
appropriate.
Instead of as
You
necessary.
got that, Leanne? We make you work hard, don't we?
Okay.
Thank you very much for that.
Christine.
So, excuse me. So is this a written letter to administrators or is this a verbal conversation? I'm just trying to understand what this is going to look like, because I think I have to be honest, I am feeling a little uncomfortable with this, because I feel like as a board, this is us delegating to the administrators through Cheryl. And it's already there that they have the freedom. And so now we've added, they have the freedom to, what was the last sentence, Jenny? I can't get the like more restrictions, the more restrictions one.
Or to implement additional restrictions as deemed appropriate.
Okay, so as deemed appropriate. So what I say is, who deems it appropriate? If the administrators are deeming it appropriate, which they currently are, this is what has brought us to this conversation. Are we then going to support our administrators as they deem it appropriate when there are other options there, or are we not? And so I feel like this is a conversation we can go around and around with. And I feel like in this, I'm really sitting on, this isn't a governance matter. I have confidence that administrators know that parents want to participate. I have confidence that administrators are taking into consideration the vast emails and phone calls and in-person conversations that they've had from parents grieving missing out on activities, and students grieving missing out of their parents and loved ones and friends participating. So yeah, I'm just feeling very uncomfortable moving forward with this.
Craig.
The correspondence is up to the superintendent, how she deems it efficient. I think that this is not inappropriate because we have responded to numerous emails from the public, from parents. And without dictating to the administrators how to do it, we're just saying clarify the communication, which is in that recommendation, and it's up to you how to do it. We're just trying to make sure that the public is clarified on what we're doing and that we're clarified and the administrators are clarified. So I don't see us impinging on anybody's authority. It's natural. It's a board job to listen to the public. And we've given the superintendent full power to talk to the administrator to clarify what's going on. And that's the intent of this, nothing else.
Can you change the wording that the superintendent communicate to the administrators rather than correspond? Because to me, it's about superintendent sharing our message instead of correspondence. So we want her to communicate that we want to see clear communication, the three pieces.
So provide communication indicating.
Indicating, yeah, clear
Sure.
communication.
Let's say provide clear communication indicating. So at the beginning where I said the word correspondence, let's change that to. Let's remove in an effort to provide clear communication because it's repetitive at this point. So let's just, I recommend that our superintendent. Clear communication, clarifying communication. Let's call it clarifying communication. I like words. Beautiful. Thank you.
So I don't know that you'll still get to consensus with what you're requesting, because I'm still not. So consensus is that we would have everybody in favor without it going to a motion. So I would ask Christine and Christina, is there pieces that you would support or what you would support moving forward, knowing what you're hearing from the rest? That it wouldn't necessarily be direction, but that it would be that this is how the board feels, or is there other wording or other pieces so that we potentially can get to consensus? Christine Light?
I'm just trying to think how to word it. I trust Cheryl and how she communicates with the administrators, and I do trust that they have honest and transparent communication with each other. I think and I agree, Craig, you said, you know, we've heard from stakeholders in our community, and it is our job to speak. So my gray area is how we come across to the administrators. I in no way want to sound like we are delegating. I don't want to be a micromanaging board that steps out of our role. I think if there's a natural way to have the conversation, I'm not sure how it happens in those admin meetings. If board perspective is considered as a natural part of that conversation, I'm not sure. I think if I can be convinced that it's not going to be heard as a board delegating, I could support it. If it is going to be reflected as a board coming in and micromanaging where we shouldn't be, then I cannot consider it. I think that's my tipping point is how it's going to be received.
And Christine?
I mean, I'm not particularly interested in holding up this conversation because I feel like it's reiterating what we have existing. Sorry, if this was a simple vote, I'd be voting no. I think it's in our documentation. Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure what it would take for me to feel like we needed to do this.
And I'm hearing from other members that it's not, I don't hear the intent of directing, that's certainly not the intent. So I do think it's about cleaning up some wording. Christine has a suggestion.
Yeah. And again, I think it comes down as the board is trying to address the concerns you're hearing from members of the public that they want to see more spectators allowed, which is allowed under the restricted exemption program. And we've been allowed to have spectators. And so I think what the recommendation would be is the board would recommend asking the superintendent to convey the sentiment of the board to consider all the concerns that we've heard by the members of the public, recognizing the administrator's autonomy over doing what's best for their school community and related to extracurricular, but to consider opening up spectators addressing the related provincial restriction exemption program. Something like it, because really you're just wanting Cheryl to express the concerns we're hearing today. That's what I think is what you're
Tyler, and then I think Christine Light is wanting to talk again.
If you're looking for a strong consensus to move this forward, I'm going to give you a hard no. We have spent a lot of time on something here to say what we've already got in place. And this is what I talk about with efficiency. We don't need longer meetings. We need to be more efficient. So I say kill this and move on because I'm done.
Thanks, Tyler. Anyone further? So Christine shared hers. Christine Lee. Anything further? So you don't have consensus, Jenny, so you're wanting to leave it there?
Yeah, I just think that there's a lack of understanding and that it's causing us all a lot of grief. Because there's a lack of understanding in the public. I'm not sure if the administrators are fully aware that they have support either way. I don't know, and I trust that that is happening. I'm sure that that's being communicated to the administrators well, but I'm not sure where a lot of this grief is coming from. So my intention was to create more specific, detailed communication so that everybody knows, hey, listen, we as a board, we support our teachers, we support our administrators, we support you going either way. And public, listen, the administrators are doing the best they can. And so that was my intention with this. If that, I'm not sure if I need to put this to a motion to end this, so it goes to a vote so that it ends.
I think you would need to put it to a motion. I don't know that you would have support,
Okay,
but you can certainly.
I'm happy to move on. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do that, but.
Okay. You don't have consensus, so that's for sure. And I don't know that you would have support for the motion. So, okay. So moving on from that, we will move on to division highlights. Oh, we need to actually extend the meeting, a motion for that. Christina might like to make that motion to extend. All in favor? And those opposed? And Tyler is opposed. Thank you. So moving on to division highlights. Who would like to go first? Andrea's dying to go first. Go ahead.
Need my reading glasses. I was privileged to be asked by John Chiefcalf, our Indigenous Education Coordinator, to accompany him and my son Drew. Oh, I think this might make me cry, so you might have to come back to me.
We support you through this, through your tears. Do you want a moment? Okay, we will come back to you. Craig, you ready with your highlights?
Yeah. I guess I played Santa Claus on Thursday and Friday and delivered a ton of cookies to 7, 8, 9 and 1/3 schools. And the response from the people that I gave the cookies, no, 10, yeah, 9 and 1/3, they all liked it. They were quite appreciative of the fact that the board would take time to deliver those, and they certainly enjoyed them. And just one highlight, I was able to watch the grade 6s for the first time since the pandemic at Senator Joyce Fairburn actually get everybody together, and the band was playing and they were doing karaoke. And on Thursday, tomorrow, I'm going to Moana at Wilson. And on Thursday, I'm going to a turkey dinner at Fleetwood Mod. And as I delivered my stuff, I was able to take a tour of Mike Mountain Horse, my other school. So
that's fabulous. Thank you. You're good, Andrea? Oh, they're going to.
I don't know if I'll be able to say everything I wanted to about my.
That's okay.
This probably has never happened at a board meeting.
No,
before.
it has. I know there's been tears before.
Yeah. Who did?
Actually, I heard
And he
Tyler
has
had
since
tears a few
moved
times.
to Clarisome.
Yeah.
It was just such a great experience to go to the reserve. And I think when you see that school looming in the distance, and if it made me choke up, like, how would it make the children feel who were left there? like knowing that. And so it was very impactful going with John to the reserve. And he's such an eloquent speaker, and he drove us through that beautiful landscape and taught us Blackfoot words, and it was wonderful. So that was my first board highlight. So I'm very thankful to him and to my son for inviting me. Then I did get to go to Westminster School, and I had such a wonderful visit there. And the renovation's gorgeous. Everything is exactly where it needs to be. And I noted the importance of their full-time counselor. That's so important to their building. Their breakfast program, their early education program. And I was just welcomed so warmly. And how their custodian goes above and beyond taking care of that school property for them after weekends on Mondays. That was amazing. And I too got to go to many schools with the Max and Custards, and I would say to my husband, he was quite a trooper, I've got to say, in the old hunting truck. And I would say, honey, don't worry, I don't know anyone in this school, so I'll be right out. And I'd come out so much later, and I'd say, oh, sorry, I knew somebody in the school, but he just kept waiting. And Bryce wrote such a beautiful post on his Facebook, and thanks to Garrett for sending out a post for us. And the response that came back on that just was, I loved the one that said, truly the best thing to be found in a school mailbox. I thought that one made me laugh. So I so appreciate Bryce at Max and Custard and everybody, and Leanne for having all those ready and being the most efficient counter I've ever seen, getting us out and about. And last night I got to go to Wilson to see Moana, and surprise, I cried to see live theater again. That was just amazing. And the little director, Caitlin Mitchell, is one of my kindergartners. So she gave me a shout out from the stage. So that was really nice. And then tomorrow I plan to go to General Stewart because my Cindy Lou Who outfit needs a spin around the block. It's been in a closet for 2 years. And then on Proby, I like how they're getting outside as well, like so that with I think sleigh rides and Santa on in the afternoon. So anyway, those were my highlights, and I am sorry, I am a crap.
No need to apologize. Thank you. Jenny, did you want to go next?
Just in the interest of time, I'll just be really quick and just say that one of my highlights was just how many of the principals and people that sent those gratitude emails in that we got to hear from, and I appreciate the efforts that you guys put into delivering all of those and coordinating those gifts for people, and it was really nice to, when I ran into teachers in public, they really spoke really emphatically about how much they enjoyed those. So I think that was a great choice, and thank you for all of your effort on that. And it was really nice to have such positive emails coming in. So
thank you. Tyler? Perfect. Christine Light.
Yes, the highlight I'll mention, I went to The Meaning of Empathy, a film. My apologies, I can't say the Blackfoot name in front of that title. I went with some of the staff of Winston Churchill to the movie mill to see this film about a locally made film about the opioid crisis and how it affects our Indigenous community, and just shared the stories of about 6 different people. So it was eye-opening and beautifully done, and just great to spend time with the Churchill staff. And I was supposed to go to Wilson last night, but was sick, so couldn't go. but my daughter went with my husband, and she said it was absolutely phenomenal. So if you haven't gone, try and go.
Thank you, Christina.
Just a shout out to all the staff and parents and families that are just working so extra hard. You can just see the effort everyone's making to try to celebrate in this season, which is always challenging. And that we know that November and December are particularly hard for many families. And as inflation has really hit a lot of families in Lethbridge really hard in the last few weeks in particular. And experiencing the Poverty Intervention Committee and all of the work that the school staff are doing that was represented there is just really extraordinary. How much schools are doing to support families. So just a shout out.
Thank you, Christina. For me, I as well was able to have the opportunity to attend the meeting of Empathy, the documentary. It was great to be there with the Winston Churchill staff and just to be able to see the stories and to see the development of the people within the story over the past couple of years. It was really touching and moving, and definitely demonstrates and shows the struggles of people within our community. I got to enjoy delivering gifts to our staff as well. It was great to be able to be out there and to share Max and custard with everybody and hear and joke and laugh with staff at the schools that we went to. It was wonderful to be able to engage with them. And last evening, I was able to attend the band concert at Senator Joyce Fairburn, and it was they moved through so many songs through both grades 6, 7, and 8, a lot of solos and duets. The band director didn't want to talk too much at the beginning because he was just, I think, moved with being able to have the audience there and for the students to be able to show to their parents the work and what they've done in their music careers. And it was just so great to see and to hear when those grade 8 students had, missed the last year and a half of being able to play an instrument, and to hear them outstanding in what they were doing and be able to share that. So lots of great opportunities to attend school council meetings and the division school council meetings as well. So it's great to be able to be out there and to see things that our students and staff are doing in our community. So thank you, certainly out to them, especially in such still challenging times. So thank you. Yes. Sounds good. So next is the board chair report. So the first thing on the board chair report is Shaping the Future conference. So that is in your package. I believe everybody had received an email with that. And in here it has Dr. Phil McRae doing a presentation on hope, resiliency, and recovery in education systems. I've attended the entire conference there before with Everactive Schools. There is a huge component on Indigenous education. Elders are present. There is lots of fabulous learning that occurs. So I had put in a recommendation that the board send up to 2 trustees to the entire Shaping the Future conference, which would also include the piece with Dr. Phil McRae, the Hope, Resiliency, and Recovery in Education System. So that's what I am putting forward for any questions, comments. Tyler.
I was just a little confused by the recommend that the board send up to 2 trustees to the conference. Trustees have the ability to go to any conference, any meeting, anything, anytime they want. So I don't know why we would recommend that somebody go up there. I think you bring it forward for information to say, hey, this conference is going on. Anyone that's interested and wants to go to do that, I think that's great. But I just didn't really understand why we were recommending up to 2 trustees.
Okay. And I think it's just more of a putting an importance to it versus we all receive the information. So I think it's just putting an importance to it. And I'm fine if there's not support for that, but certainly hearing around the table and the importance of some of the work that they do at the conference. And I'm fine if that's where it sits and that it is as information. That's fine with me. I certainly highly recommend attendance at this. Go ahead, Christine.
Further to what Tyler is, when a board recommends trustees to go, then it doesn't come out of their personal PL versus coming out of their personal PL. So that's the difference. Yeah. And so that's why you probably, when it's something like this, you want to do a recommendation or not recommendation, information.
In that case, I don't know that we should be recommending for that when trustees already have PL allowance. So I don't know that to me, I'm not okay with that. I don't deem that to be appropriate, given that we already have a PL allowance, and you should be able to use that to go if you want.
Sounds good. Thanks for your comments. Any questions about the conference? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next.
Is it a 1 day or a 2 day?
I believe it's 2.5 day. I think it starts on the Thursday and goes to the Saturday.
Okay.
So moving on, the next is community conversations. And this is something that I am bringing forward in terms of looking at how we engage with our community, looking at our assurance plan, looking at our responsibilities as trustees to engage with our community and our constituents. I've certainly put a background there. I would like to recommend that the board approve that we have at least once a month community conversation engagement opportunities that would have a budget of $200 a month. We would look at having those off-site as a mix and mingle. The intention of this to look at reaching communities that we might not otherwise within the city of Lethbridge, being able to engage with parents, families, staff that we wouldn't otherwise have that engagement opportunity with. Yes, we do reach a large amount of people at our town hall and we get emails, but I think that it's important that we hear from a larger majority of others within our community. And I think that this is just an opportunity for us to look at that. It wouldn't be something that every trustee has to attend every month. We would look at it as a varying days and times. And yeah, so I put that forward for any conversation. Some nods. Craig?
I agree with it.
Okay. So I would like to move that the board approve at least once a month community conversation engagement opportunity with a budget of $200 a month. Tyler?
I like it. I think it's an interesting idea. I'm not sure what kind of uptake it's going to get. So the only thing I might say is that where the motion says at least once a month, maybe it's something where every second month really fits better because I am not sure how different of an audience you're going to get outside of the people that would go to DSC or would attend different things. So I'm good with it and I'm for it, but I don't know if you want to restrict it to making sure it happens at least once a month. That's all the comment I would.
Okay. And with my intent with it, I think that we need to be intentional in where we're doing it as well, so that it's like, I don't want to turn away any DSC parents by any means or parents that come to our school councils, but I think that, and I'm totally fine with doing every second month instead, especially to try it. But I think that it's that we look at intentionally the locations that we go to are places that we will hopefully access some other community members that have opportunity to come and meet with us. And I also think that it's important to read the community as well. So we may start with them, and I say in here that it's not for that all trustees have to come. We may also find that it's overpowering if all 7 of us are there. So I think that it's certainly something that we play with and we see how it goes. It's not a written in stone that, we're going to have, 5 of the 7 of us there. I think that we really need to play the environment that we're going to so that we're not overpowering and that we really do it intentionally, that we are making ourselves available to those community conversations. So.
And I'm not, just for clarification, I'm not saying don't do it once a month.
Yep.
Like that's great if it works out that. I'm just saying I don't know in the motion if you want to tie yourself to force it once a month.
Right.
if there's, not that good uptake here, or it is over here or something like that, but that's all.
I'm certainly open to rewording it if it's approve up to once a month. Want that changed? Yeah. Approve to once per month. Okay. And if there is uptake, then we do it the once a month. And if not, then we can look at every second month. There may be a time where we don't do it for 2 months and then we do it. But I think just having that intentionality out there. So further comments or questions? Christine?
Do you think I think it's a really great idea. I think it's just another opportunity to reach more parents. Do you think it's valuable to add the once a month during the school calendar year?
Yes. Yeah.
That was it. That's all I had.
I am totally good with during calendar year. I appreciate all the amendments. Well, and I started with a totally different title, and I am not like I am fine if we change the title too. Like, it's more about the intent. So for me, it's about us really making intentional time to meet with community that wants to have conversation. So, okay, any other amendments? We're good? No more questions? So those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Next is ASBA report. And I didn't have a written report because there's been lots back and forth in terms of where we're at with things with ASBA and where we're at with curriculum. So I think at this point, I will just kind of share a couple of pieces. One is that the Minister of Education does plan to make some trips around the province in January and February. So that is coming up. She will be coming out to meet with us as a board. As soon as we have more information on that, we will share that. She will also be meeting with board chairs from our zone. So that will be an opportunity for us as a zone to get together as well. So we'll share that information when we find that out. And then just in regards to curriculum, we as ASBA, we will be providing a report through board chairs, a report that deadline has been extended to the end of January. So that will be, we'll continue to work on that as board chairs. And then just on the topic of curriculum, yesterday was the announcement from the minister, and today we had a media release and we did a media event here today. And Garrett, there was quite a few media. There was a lot of cameras and a lot of mics. I do know that it was on the news tonight. I've had some feedback already. So that was out there. We had a statement that put forward. There was nothing that's different than what the messaging that we've had as a board and the previous board shared the same information. So you can certainly watch all the media outlets, and the division will be sharing that. So we shared a statement and then I answered questions. So we'll definitely be looking for what that advisory committee looks like going forward. And we'll be looking at ensuring that it has representation that we're interested in. So other than that, that's all I'll share at this point with regards to ASBA. Then moving on from that, we'll move to the Associate Superintendent reports. So business and operations.
Thank you. Well, you have my report in front of you, but I just wanted to highlight, I gave you 2 items at your desks, at your places. One is a brochure for sponsorship that we're doing for the esports program. And it's just to see, we're building a esports hub, which is a place to do kind of esports competitions and whatnot at LCI. So they're doing some renovations and buying some equipment and whatnot. And so this is a brochure that's been created to develop some sponsorship for that, sent out to some of our vendors. And I understand we've gotten some. I don't know the value, so but I know that we've been getting some good uptake on that. And then the second one is the Digital Citizen Handbook for school leaders. These have been given out to our school leaders at middle school and high school. Jesse Sedlowski is giving you this as a Christmas present. So you can see some of the information here that we've given to our school leaders. And then Mike Ribble will be doing a presentation to parents in January We've done, I think we did it last year and it was really well received. And so he's got a book out. So just thought I'd give you that for your interest. And then Craig had asked for some additional columns on the spreadsheet for the enrollment capacity. So that's attached to the end of my report. And so what I did is I gave you the 1920 pre-COVID capacity enrollment utilization, and then the 2020-21 COVID, that we were in COVID, and then the 21-22, just so you can see how our enrollment and capacity. So 1920 pre-COVID was also was kind of where we actually made all our decisions when we were doing the boundary review changes, right? Pre-COVID, and then you had the COVID year, which dropped our enrollment and changed everything on us, and then 21-22. So does this give you what you needed?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, Christine. Based on the current capacity, if we applied for a new school, we probably wouldn't get one, right?
It depends where we would, yeah, it depends where we apply for a new school. Right now, the new school we have on our books needed is in the south end of West Lethbridge after the one we're currently building. We wouldn't even be able to start a build on that for a number of years just because of not even having a place to actually put the school site. We don't have a school site yet. And where we'd put the school site, where we sort of think the school site would go, is an area that's not going to be developed for about maybe 10 years.
Okay.
And so capacity wise, we're not there yet, but in growth, we will be there. Like it won't take long, because as you can see, Coalbanks, even though we moved a whole bunch of kids, that community, and we're just restricted now to that community is still growing. Like we received a subdivision notice. They're adding another, I think, 59 dwellings there in the next phase. And so Coalbanks is one we're going to have to continually get modulars for, and that's where our biggest pressure is. So capacity wise, we'd actually in that end would start to need one fairly soon.
Right. And the other question is, were there any surprises after you've done the boundary realignment of the capacity of these schools? Because a number of them are under 50%.
Well, some of the surprises was COVID, because we did our enrollment projections pre-COVID, and we were doing our projections. Our projections went like this when we hit COVID, and we're not back up to where we were pre-COVID. So that's where the surprises are, because they're not at. Some of them were lower expected, some were significantly lower, but again, that's because of COVID, because we haven't come back yet. And time will tell, because enrollment has shifted, population shifted, people left town, that sort of thing. So we had some that came in higher than expected. So it was because COVID kind of threw all our guesses out the window, sort of thing. Yeah.
Thanks for the information.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions for Christine? Thank you for sharing. Next is Moraig's report, and it is there in front of you. Are there questions? And Cheryl might want to add to it. I know Moraig is usually pretty quick anyway.
Moraig's usually quick. And at first, I just want to, make sure that I recognize that Moraig is taking care of school division business right now with some schools. And so certainly I'm familiar with her report. If there's any questions, I know she really wanted to highlight that adolescent survey report summary. You know that Moraig has a passion for level of activity and engagement of children, and so that survey is really helpful for informing some actions. And of course, one of our programs that we've been proud of for a number of years, and that's the Fast Forward, because that program really makes a focused effort on finding the students that didn't finish high school, bringing them back in. We've got amazing staff, including Nikki Kale and some Victoria Park staff that work with those students and try to ensure that they get completed their high school diplomas. And of course, again, we've got, and I think we just heard from Andrea, who had her experience with John Chiefcalf. We've got an incredible leader there that Moraig works with closely, and Moraig and John have moved that initiative, our Indigenous education program, quite far, and lots of work happening with the Spanish bilingual program, because we have to determine what that looks like. as we move past Cobanks in elementary school and potentially deciding whether or not there's the numbers for program for grade 6.
Are there questions? We thank Morag for the report and for all the work. Christine Light, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Cheryl, do you know how the survey was distributed to students?
I know that Morag worked with the University of Lethbridge. That was the University of Lethbridge combined with Lethbridge School Division, but I'm not directly familiar.
Okay.
Sorry, Christine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So with that, certainly thank Morag for the report, and knowing that she's certainly had a long day. We appreciate all the work that she has done together with you, the other staff, and the local community. So thank you for that. Moving on to Mike.
Thank you. So yeah, the report's there. I'll hit a couple of highlights for you. Certainly one of the big highlights was last Friday, the HR team had an opportunity to go to the University of Lethbridge and go to their career fair for beginning teachers. And it was just awesome. Really enjoyable to get an opportunity to speak with beginning teachers, and their excitement and enthusiasm for coming into the profession is the profession. We certainly have great people in the profession, and we certainly have great people coming in the profession. It's lots of fun to just talk about all the good things about the school division. So really missed doing that, and really enjoyed it. So it was myself, Rhonda, and Katie who went. So yeah, really good day. Talked to well over 100 beginning teachers. That was awesome. And then just thought we'd share with you some highlights. November traditionally isn't a particularly busy time of the year for hiring, but you can see even in a slower year, there's still a fair bit going on. So 243 applications in the month. And one of the things that was neat, our software gives us some stats on this, and 35 different staff members involved in the hiring processes, which is really good because it's important to be very collaborative. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. And otherwise, unless there's questions, that's it for me.
Thank you. Questions? Jenny.
I'm going to make a totally unrelated comment. It's my kids' Christmas concert at 7. Can I slip out and then come back if we're still here?
You can slip out and we'll let you know where we're at.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any questions for Mike? Seeing none, we'll move on to superintendent's report. And you want to move through each thing? Okay, perfect.
All right, I'll just progress through the items there. Board priorities report. I think, like as I say every time that I present this report, is I'm not going to read it to you. It's there for you, and I really believe strongly that this is a critically important report for you, because this relates directly to your fiduciary area of sort of that strategic alignment and knowledge of what we're doing. How is what we're doing serving the board priorities? And so certainly, if you've got questions or comments on any of those things happening, please don't hesitate to let me know. I just assume that you've gone through that. Certainly, I think that you can see that your education center leaders, your directors, are incredibly committed and creative. Your schools are doing all kinds of things that align with the division priorities. And I think that when you take a look at the domain of governance, you can see that there are many things happening that engage community in many different ways. And so what's important with this report is, if you get asked by your public, what are you doing about, what are you doing with any of those areas that fall under your assurance domains or fall under your priorities, that's there for you every month and is there to inform you. And again, if you've ever got questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. And I'll continue with donations and support. And so certainly we're an incredibly fortunate school division. We live in a very generous community, and that's always there to celebrate and recognize the donations and support. And so we certainly had the grade 3 community foundation. The grade 3 Nicole Agnes Davidson was a contest winner of Alberta's Random Acts of Kindness, and it's fun because actually a number of schools are doing this. If you were to walk in there, you would see things all over the bulletin boards where students are recognizing students for their random acts of kindness, and it's an amazing citizenship endeavor for our students there for sure. Acknowledgements of excellence. Again, this is, I'm assuming, you know, that you've taken a look at this, and of course the trustees who are liaisons to these schools that are recognized each month are fortunate. There's again all kinds of things that are happening in that school that can be showcased. So this month is Dr. Robert Plaxton Showcase, and Senator Buchanan Showcase. And so certainly we've already had some things talked about Dr. Robert Plaxton. The technology there is incredible with the integration of technology in classrooms and the makerspace. And we've got our vice principal, Andy, he is working on, I think, Christine, what's the name of he's working with all of the communities to create the three-dimensional, the VR, virtual reality, and they're just being real forerunners in that area. Sarah Buchanan, I can't remember who's the liaison there. You can't get a more caring, incredibly caring environment with a creative timetable and schedule that provide for optimal teacher collaboration embedded throughout the day and time with different classroom configurations and meeting the learning needs of students. They're masterful with their early intervention programs, literacy, numeracy, as well as threading through the Indigenous lens and ways of knowing through their pieces. Senator Joyce Fairbairn is there for you as well. And of course, that's been in there for fourth year. Boy, time flies. And certainly a showcase middle school that has a lot of things happening throughout. And they're a school that focused on literacy and numeracy right from the start as being threaded through a middle school, as well as all of those opportunities that happen in middle school. The town hall, that's where I take pause. Last board meeting in November, I asked trustees to hopefully come back with some ideas in terms of a town hall question that then I could work with directors in our tech team to put together our town hall virtual platform. And so with that, I turn it to the trustees for ideas in terms of a question.
Excellent. So we've had a bit of time to think about what might want for a town hall, potential questions, potential topic. What are some thoughts that you guys have come up with? Andrea's debating.
Reaching parents, how do we get more of them to the table? What are some things that keep them from coming? Are there some barriers that they have that we could help with to get more of them to come?
Thank you, Andrea. And barriers to coming to the school or to the town hall, or?
I guess it could be a language barrier. It could be a barrier of technology if it's online, a barrier of not owning a vehicle if it's in person.
But a barrier to them coming to town hall?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
That's what I mean.
Christina?
I've heard a couple of requests for conversation on the topic of mental health in schools. And I believe it has been a topic of a previous town hall, like if I remember correctly. But I know that's really pressing for folks, as well as I know many parents are really concerned about what they'd like to see for their kiddos to help them bridge the gap that COVID has imposed on their education. So not an official question, but those are the topics I've heard.
Topics, there you go. I've certainly heard lots in regards to the mental health piece as well. For me, one of the things was looking at the barriers. That's why I was asking you what you were intending there. I know for me, I look at the assurance plan and knowing that the work that we have ahead of us at our strategic planning, we need to have means what we get out of town hall needs to provide us some, inform us of what direction we want to take. And I think looking at that piece of the barriers, so like what do you think the barriers are for us to have transparency, accountability, and open communication? Just looking at that piece of being able to plan moving forward, we need to know what are the barriers, what's stopping people from communicating, what's stopping people from coming to school council meeting, what's stopping people from coming to town hall, what are those pieces? And I think the mental health piece is huge as well for a topic, and how can we support families, our students, our staff during this pandemic time. Even when that question was asked previous, it was certainly not during pandemic time. So it's looking at that mental health piece and how do we support moving forward on mental health. So, Craig.
I was just wondering that, have we ever taken the time after a major decision a year later to connect with the people and see how they have found the major decision that's been done? I mean, we did one 17 years ago, and I don't think there was, as far as I know, there wasn't a lot of follow-up following that decision of great alignment. And I wonder if the board should, if we want transparency and communication, if that's not one of the things we should look at, is how do parents feel about the realignment now that they've been doing it for 10 months? Are they happy? Are they still dissatisfied? I mean, those are major decisions, and sometimes the board kind of makes it. We hear stuff at the start, and then we kind of just go on our merry way. So that would be one area. I would agree with Christina about mental health and barriers too. There's quite a few of those that, like just for kids, barriers at school, like access to computers, access to, you know, what can we do to help them, and what can we do to help parents and I hate using the word, but assimilate into the culture. I don't want them to be us, but they have to learn how to live in this culture to be successful. And how do we appreciate their culture, and how do we get them to appreciate our culture too? And that's all under that mental health and barriers.
Thanks, Craig. Tyler, did you have anything to add? It's like,
No, I think probably I would lean toward either mental health or something to do with the barriers like you mentioned. You certainly can't have both. Both of them are very large topics. Mental health in itself is massive. Like I don't know, we'd still even have to narrow that down, but barriers, you just have to be very clear about which ones you're kind of focusing in on to make that pretty clear. I think either one of those is probably pretty well timed with what we've got going on. That's what I would say. So I think I'm probably good with either one of those if we can focus the question.
I just want to hear from Christine, and then I'll come back to you. Christine, did you have suggestions?
Yeah, I was thinking of either the area of inclusion or the area of wellness, right? So in what ways is the division providing support, and, oh, where did I have it? What are some new innovative ways to promote and strengthen mental wellness? Could be one question. What are some ways that the division is already supporting you in mental wellness? Something like that, just so we have a gauge of what's already being provided and how that can be strengthened, and where we're missing in that. And I do think inclusion is a big one as well. I agree we can't have inclusion and wellness. Those are two very big things. But we know we have our inclusion and diversity table that we've started, like we're moving towards being more intentional in more ways. And so it would be good to get feedback on to be aware of what people are actually aware that we're doing. So what are some ways that the division is promoting and fostering a culture of inclusivity? And what are some ways the division could strengthen or create a more inclusive environment? That's not quite the question, but to get both sides of the coin on that, I think would be very insightful.
Thank you, Christina.
Just for clarity, Christine, do you mean inclusion in terms of like the engagement piece that Allison and Andrea were talking about?
I think what I was thinking is having a generalized inclusion question, because then we could actually, the feedback that we get will show the perspective of how people are seeing that, right? So we'll know where we sit as a community when we say inclusion. How are people understanding that word? It would give people an opportunity to share, I don't feel included because, so part of it is parent engagement. That's part of that conversation. Part of it is cultural awareness. That's part of that conversation. So that's what I was thinking of with that. Does that make sense? Okay.
And I know if I can share, like I had kind of written something down in terms of when I always look at like when we ask a survey to somebody, it's the people that don't answer that we actually want to hear from. And when I look at the question, and not saying that this has to be where it goes, but this is kind of my thought process on it, is that often the people that come to the table to town hall are people that are engaged. They're there, and I love that they're there. Don't ever get me wrong. But what I've written down is that you came to the table tonight. What do you think is what do you think kept others from coming here tonight? So really looking at it as put yourself in other people's shoes, and why do you think that, and that may be too far out there, but I just think that there is other barriers to why we don't have inclusion of more people. And so obviously inclusion is a huge piece for me, but I think that we really need to look at how we phrase something if we look at that piece. I have a question in regards to wellness. I know that a couple months ago I had heard Morag speak in regards to the division looking at some wellness work that the division is doing in regards to not just support, but in terms of what do people need, where are people at? Do you know where things are at with that for Morag, or I don't want to do something that we'll be able to get that information for wellness?
I think we could get a more fulsome report in January. Certainly, I think that I know that human resources and instructional services, are taking a sort of a multi-prong approach to looking at what are we already providing, because we do have, like, for example, the mental health project. We've got a wellness teams. What are we doing, and what do we see as gaps, perhaps? And so certainly, a lot of research, a lot of work, a lot of reflection on what's happening there and what some of the needs might be. And so I don't think that's finished, Mike, because you've been around that table as well for the wellness piece. It's still an exploration right now.
Is that information that we would have prior to our strat planning in March? Don't know for sure. Okay, sounds good. Craig.
I like your idea of just basically, I think that's overriding all of the other issues, mental health, barriers. But why aren't people engaged? And if we get from the public that's there, maybe we'll get some ideas on how to engage more of our parents, public, into what we're doing in the school. And so I think that's sort of, because that overrides mental health, barriers, all of that. And like you say, most of the time it's the committed ones and we hear the same basic thing. It's time maybe we try to get them to give us some ideas.
And I do often think with all my work with school councils, it was often that when you come to a school council table, you're often not just there representing your own voice. You've heard other voices and you're coming to the table to share those. So that's kind of where some of this comes from for me tonight, is that I think that those parents that are super engaged and are coming to our division school council, to our town hall, they have connections with other families, and it's not that they're coming just representing themselves often, that they're coming representing other voices. And I think that our community members that come, they come representing others as well. So when I look at that question that I had thought about, it was really reflective of those pieces. And I think that it might give us some direction going forward of what, like Craig said, in terms of it would cover a large range. But I am totally not like, I'm good with what others come up with and where we go from here. Cheryl, what's your, we've heard from everybody.
I think if we can agree on the topic, then then I could next week, today's Tuesday, this week, before the end of this week, work with a couple of you who would like to work with me on scripting a question if we can agree with a topic. So I think I've heard two that are fairly broad that may encompass the different perspectives that have been shared. So one would be inclusion as a topic, because I do think it can be worded to take a look at, how are we inclusive with respect to safe and caring? How are we inclusive with respect to recognition of diversity and our diversity of population in our schools across a breadth of different ways? And how are we inclusive in terms of welcoming parents and making sure that parents are engaged and feel included in, one of the questions that measure in your assurance plan that measure governance is the question to parents about whether or not they are engaged with school, to what degree, the level of satisfaction in terms of their engagement with the school and ability to make decisions. And so that inclusion piece can involve parents, can involve, and however we want to script that, we don't want it too big, but certainly it can, whoever works on that question can consider those different things that have been brought forward. The other thing that could encompass more broadly as well is taking a look at, it's a common term right now as a follow-up to COVID, sort of that bridging the gap idea. How do you bridge the gap with respect to mental health? How do you bridge the gap with respect to learning and the kind of learning that puts us back on track for a learning focus? How do we bridge the gap for learning? Because we know there's lots of kids. I was just visiting with our lead teachers about some of our outcomes of our Founders in Pinal, and we've got a lot of kids who are going to need support, not just little ones, and all the way through. So how do we bridge the gap with learning, and how do we bridge the gap with parents? How do we re-engage parents after a period of time of parents not necessarily being in schools in a variety of ways? And so it could be either sort of that bridging the gap piece, or it could be inclusion. That's my recommendation. And maybe if we could pick one of those, I could work with the board.
Tyler?
Bridging the gap is okay, but we can't bridge that many gaps. That's too broad. I would just want to make a comment in regard to inclusion. I like inclusion for a future year. I'm not real excited about inclusion now. Still being in COVID, coming out of COVID, I'm not excited about the answers that we're necessarily going to get between, well, you're not including me because you're forcing me to get vaccinated, and I can't go into this. I haven't been able to go into the school for a year, so I this is terrible. I haven't been able to see my kid. You want to be inclusive? Let me see my kid in the concerts, which we're just kind of getting to now. So I would like to put a little distance between parents and families not being able to really participate in the school setting before we actually ask that question about who feels included and not included and everything. So I would push that one. I think it's a good topic. I just don't like the timing of that one for now, is what I would say.
Okay. Andrea?
So Christina's ideas about mental health or bridging the learning gap.
I can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. So Christina's ideas about bridging the learning gap or the mental wellness. could be good topics for this year.
Okay. So you feel you have some information?
So I would need a couple of people, so we could have bridging the gap, but as Tyler pointed out, this is a big topic. So I would need a couple of board members to work with me to narrow that topic a bit. Certainly one of the learning gaps is, one of the learning barriers to learning is mental health. And so how do we, we've got the academic bridging the gap, and we've got the mental health bridging the gap. And if I could have a couple volunteer board members to work with me on that, perhaps we can finalize that and move forward. And if the board is happy with having those individuals represent you and frame a question, we'll send it out to the whole board.
You're looking at doing that this week?
And then or I could do it early next week because I'll be here Monday, Tuesday. Or actually it's likely, because Leanne's looking at me like you have no room in your schedule for anything. So it's likely we could do it Monday next week would be the best day.
So I am not available. Others? Christine Light and others? Can we do it at the end of the day? What, Andrea? Or she's looking at her calendar.
You brought the topic up. I thought maybe she would want.
No, I'm happy to trust it to someone else as well if anybody wants. It was a community idea, not my idea. I can do early next week or Friday if I'm needed.
So I'm gonna aim for Monday. So Leanna, if you could look at my calendar and see if we can find a time that fits Christine and Christina, if I'm understanding correctly.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then we will send it out to the whole board for feedback.
Okay. And moving on to COVID highlights. I know we did cover quite a bit earlier when it was during the REP portion, but are there additional pieces that you'd like to add, Cheryl?
No, I don't. I think we covered a lot of that. I mean, certainly Garrett, as before, will take pieces out of the report that we do in camera that has some copyrighted graphs and so forth, and put that together for our website like he does every month, so that the information is there for our public. So if you've got your public wondering what is the updated information in the school division, it will be on the website. Garrett will get that up before the end of the week. And so certainly that's there. There's lots of conversation about the CMOH order. And I just wanted the restriction exemption program to assure the board that really that doesn't change what's been happening in our school division, that we have a Lethbridge School Division restriction exemption program, and that was written to accommodate changes in this order as it progresses, right? And so that we're good there. And I think that, our cases are good. We have had 4 classes now that have had the exclusion order, where they've, so our most recent classes got an early Christmas break because we had 4 students in the same class. And so they were, their last day of school was yesterday. Yeah. And so that's that. But really, it's been fairly stable. We haven't had any huge problematic areas. And so right now we're stable and good, and we'll reassess when we get back from the holidays, unless there's any questions.
Not seeing any further questions on that. And next is the calendar of events. So that is there. I do have one to add, is January 19th is the Zone 6 ASPA meeting at 10:30. And that is open to all trustees to attend. I will let you know if it is in person or virtual. And yeah, are there any questions about that meeting? You are all invited to come though. Anything else on the calendar events? You're good with that? Go ahead, Craig.
I got an email from the ATA. They're having a virtual summit, teachers and school board trustees, a half-day virtual summit on January 13th.
Okay. Thank you. We can add that.
Yeah, well, it's provincial ATA.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on, I'll be quick on this one, was the ASCA engagement opportunity. So the information is there for you. The presentation that was done by Dr. Amy, who is actually local here to the University of Lethbridge. That presentation is available there for you if you wish to go take a look. The polling questions, responses are all there as well. There was at least a couple of parents from our school division that were present on it. It was not largely attended. In total, there was probably just over 100 people, and that included a considerable amount of trustees as well as ASCA staff and board. So I don't know that it was necessarily hugely representative, but the information is there for you to take a look at. And then Community Engagement Committee is Jenny. The report is there. If there's any questions, I know Christine could answer any because she was in attendance. Are there any questions? Seeing none, the Facilities Committee. Tyler.
Report is there. I think it's pretty well detailed. I do a great job writing up these reports because Christine does them. But
Perfect.
Yeah, that's why it doesn't seem like I'm that smart, because I'm not.
You did a great job, Tyler.
There's most of it is there. The only thing I'd say is the new school on track for September 2025 in there, and that one's going to be a 2-story, just based on the site plan and everything else. So I don't know that was in there, but we haven't had a 2-story school in a long time, so we're going to have one there, but we're just kind of in the latest development plans for how that's going to work. So, if anyone has any questions.
Excellent. Not seeing any questions. So Christine for Division School Council.
Thanks, Allison. It's pretty straightforward. It's in front of you there. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you for doing that. And the next meeting is there January 10th meeting? And again,
sorry, yes, January 10th. So yeah.
Good. All trustees are welcome to attend that, even though we have Christine as our trustee rep. So thank you. Moving on to Policy Intervention Committee, Christina.
No, Poverty Intervention Committee.
Sorry, Poverty Intervention. What did I
policy.
Say? Sorry.
I apologize. It's an oral report, but I did provide a written copy of my oral report to Leanne for inclusion. Okay. Just some big stuff is that the subcommittee met with all of the principals. So thank you, Christine, for really spearheading that as on behalf of the board. I attended the last couple, but it was mostly Christine. And some of the trends from there that I just wanted to bring to the attention of everyone was that the schools recognize the medical doctor crisis and were appreciative of the board's advocacy. The schools have identified that there's a lack of fine art subsidies available for their students in the community. There's an increasing number of high school students called upon by families to earn income or provide childcare while parents go to earn income themselves. This number has increased over the years and seeing more and more in that situation these days. And bus passes continue to be a real pressure point for a lot of schools, whether it be high schoolers needing to go to extracurriculars that are not covered by the 50 passes that's available for the Poverty Intervention Committee, or not having passes available for parents to accompany small children, or the many, many reasons that public transportation is a challenge. And so I will be bringing a motion in January around advocacy for accessible transit as you advocate to the city. The rest will be in the report.
Thank you, Christina. Any questions? No questions. Okay, Craig, your Policy Advisory Committee.
Yeah, we had a meeting on December 8th. You can read which policies we looked at. We made sure that the word inclusion was put in, covered everything that you could possibly do wrong as far as going after people. And we made sure that there was a little more clarification of who to talk to in the harassment thing and non-union, and just tidied up all the language to his, her, or to their. And that's it. And next meeting is the 12th. Now, I know we haven't discussed it yet, but we'll probably, there's a couple of these things that
we've moved to the next meeting, and I'm not sure where we're at on that one. So.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Craig? Seeing none, I'll move on to Economic Development Lethbridge. So Economic Development Lethbridge has had an education seat on their board, and I was appointed for that education sector representation seat. It's 31 people on the board. The mayor is the vice chair, and it's a great opportunity for us to have engagement in other areas of the community. They definitely are hugely supporting the shortage of physicians and doing research and studies into that. Looking at, obviously, for the business community, it's important that we have physicians here in our community. So we emphasize the fact of the impact that that has on education as well. When we look at other work that we can do together is looking at the piece of connecting our student community with the business community, ensuring that there's some more opportunities. I know that there's lots of great opportunities already, but it just expands that opportunity. So I will be certainly sharing, and it is a shared seat between Holy Spirit and Lethbridge School Division. So it's not that I'm just representing our school division, it's shared. I will be the appointed person until 2024, and then it will switch to Holy Spirit. But it's a great opportunity for us to work together, and I'll be sharing information back here. And if there's anything that you want me to take forward, I certainly will. Are there any questions? Nope. Perfect. Okay, so moving on, there is the correspondence there. Is there any questions on any of the correspondence that's attached? Seeing none, we have a couple of items that we still need to take care of in camera. Craig?
Just in case someone gives us a call.
Yes.
Did our administration reply to the petition from Emmanuel Christian School? Some sort of reply. Because there is a letter there that they had the petition. So.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
I haven't provided an official response. I was waiting for it to come to correspondence to the board, and now that it's been here, I'll work with, again, if there's specific direction you'd like to provide for a response. Otherwise, I'll draft and work with Board Chair Allison on a response, and would CC all of the board members on that.
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you. So, seeing nothing further for this piece of the meeting, I'd like to ask for a motion to go into camera. Tyler?
I'd like to make a different motion.
Okay.
I would like to, I don't know if you motion or what, but I'd like to suspend the meeting for dinner and come back to in camera after a dinner break.
Okay. Can we just, I don't know that it'll necessarily, give me 2 seconds. Take a look at what was on our in camera.
Should it?
It'll be quick. There's just one.
You got 8 minutes. Go. I move that we move back in camera. Motion we move back in camera.
Excellent. And if we're not able to keep it short, then we will certainly adjourn and have supper. So all in favor of moving into camera? And that's approved. Thank you.